Where's your grandmother's mark? The woman in the faded green jacket stood beside a folding table at the estate sale, holding a gray bowl upside down. She had passed the quilts, the silver-plated coffee service, and every vase Tessa's mother had arranged like museum pieces. The bowl had come from a box marked kitchen stuff, $3. Tessa wiped her palms on her jeans. It isn't on that one. No. The woman ran her thumb over the unglazed ring beneath the bowl. That's why I'm asking? Grant looked up from counting cash. If you want signed pieces, the good stuff's on the lawn. This is just what was left in the old studio. The woman glanced toward the crooked outbuilding behind the farmhouse. Evelyn Rowan's studio? Our grandmother's, Grant said. Mostly junk now. Her attention returned to Tessa. There was dried blue glaze on Tessa's sleeve, though she hadn't noticed it until then. Did you make this? Tessa looked at the bowl she had held wet between both hands years earlier, while Evelyn stood behind her saying, Again. Center it again. I helped. The woman turned it right side up. Can you still make them? 19 days earlier, Tessa had been standing in the same kitchen, trying to decide whether a peach yogurt counted as dinner when her grandmother died. Evelyn had refused the yogurt at 6 because it was peach. She had eaten peach yogurt every Thursday for nearly 2 years, but that evening she examined the label as if Tessa were trying to slip her industrial solvent. I don't like the pieces, she said. There are no pieces. It's yogurt. There are always pieces. You ate this exact one last week. Then I was polite last week. Tessa peeled the lid back for herself. That must have been exhausting. The corner of Evelyn's mouth moved, not quite a smile, but they had learned to live on small currencies. The television muttered from the next room. Tessa had left the weather on because Evelyn found game shows insulting and cable news bad for digestion. Rain ticked against the windows over the sink. On the counter sat the pharmacy bag Tessa had picked up after her diner shift, beside a stack of unopened mail and one of Evelyn's old stoneware mugs holding 3 dead pens. Evelyn reached for the mug. Her fingers bumped it instead. Tessa caught it before it tipped. Easy. I know where my own cup is. I know. You move things. I moved it 6 inches so I could wipe up your tea. That's moving it? Tessa slid the mug closer. Evelyn wrapped both hands around it, though it was empty. Her knuckles had swollen so badly over the past year that she could no longer close her fingers around the handle. The mug was one of her early ones, brown with a cream stripe, sturdy enough to survive being dropped on brick. A tiny wren had been pressed into the bottom before firing. Evelyn had marked thousands of pieces that way. She had never marked one of Tessa's. Tessa ate 2 spoonfuls of yogurt while standing. You want soup? No. Toast? No. An omelet? At 7 at night? Eggs remain legal after sunset. Evelyn stared toward the dark window. Your mother called? That explained the mood, or at least gave it a convenient shelf to sit on. What did she want? She asked whether the dining table was walnut. Tessa let out a breath through her nose. Subtle. She thinks subtlety is when she waits until the second question. Did you tell her? I told her it was a table. That time Tessa did laugh. Evelyn's mouth softened again, pleased despite herself. Then she looked suddenly tired, the sharpness draining out of her face so quickly that Tessa set down the yogurt. You okay? Perfectly. You don't look perfectly. I've never looked perfect, neither have you. We've survived the scandal. Evelyn pushed herself up from the chair. Tessa moved around the table. What do you need? My blue sweater. I'll get it. I can still walk to my own bedroom. You asked what your coffee mug was doing in the refrigerator this morning. I was cooling it. It was empty. That works faster. Tessa should have insisted. She replayed that later until every word went smooth from handling. She should have made Evelyn sit down. She should have noticed the way her left slipper dragged. She should have called the nurse when Evelyn complained of the headache, even though Evelyn complained about headaches, weather, modern tomatoes, and the decline of proper handles with roughly equal conviction. Instead, Tessa let her take 4 slow steps toward the hall. Evelyn stopped beside the old pantry door and pressed a hand to the wall. Grandma? The empty mug fell first. It struck the linoleum and rolled in a wobbling circle without breaking. Afterward, Tessa remembered absurd things. 1 dead pen had fallen out and landed beneath the refrigerator. Rainwater came in through the open front door as the paramedics carried their equipment inside. Somebody moved the kitchen chair, and Tessa kept wanting to put it back. When Grant arrived, he was wearing loafers without socks and kept saying, "What happened?" as though she had withheld the useful part. Elaine came 40 minutes later with her lipstick still perfect. She held Tessa tightly in the kitchen, then drew back and looked at her. "When did you last check on her?" The question was probably innocent. Elaine had a talent for making innocent questions sound itemized. "I was with her." "Oh, honey, I didn't mean I was right here. I know you were." Grant picked up the unbroken mug from the counter, turned it over, and looked at the wren. "This one of hers?" Tessa took it from him. "Yes, I just wondered." He went quiet in the way people did when they wanted credit for restraint. For the next week, the farmhouse filled with casseroles and people who called Tessa brave. She did not feel brave. She felt unwashed and oddly furious at anyone who brought food in a dish that had to be returned. Evelyn would have understood that. Evelyn had labeled every borrowed pie plate with masking tape before the pie was cool. At the funeral, Elaine spoke about her mother's artistry. Grant told 3 people that he had grown up in the pottery business, although he had once been banned from the studio for throwing bottle caps into a glaze bucket. Tessa stood beside the framed photograph near the guest book and listened to them remember a warmer woman than the one she knew. Their Evelyn wore flowing linen, taught herself an ancient craft, and believed every object carried the touch of its maker. Tessa's Evelyn barked, "Too thick," from across a room without looking up. She scraped glaze off the bottoms of pots with a paring knife and saved rubber bands in a coffee tin. She could make a pitcher feel weightless in the hand, then spend an entire afternoon complaining that no one manufactured a decent sponge anymore. Tessa loved both women. She trusted only one of them. The colored stickers appeared 2 days after the funeral. Elaine brought them in a clear plastic folder, along with a legal pad, a tape measure, and chicken salad from a deli. Evelyn disliked. Grant arrived carrying coffee for himself and his wife, Kendra, but not for Tessa. Kendra noticed, offered hers, and then pulled it back when Tessa accepted too quickly. "Sorry," Kendra said. "I already drank from it. I've had vaccines." Grant looked at Tessa. "You want me to go get you one?" "No. You sure?" "Yes." "Okay, because I would." Elaine placed the stickers in the center of the dining table. Red, blue, green, yellow. "We need to do this without getting emotional," she said. Tessa stared at her. "More emotional," Elaine amended. "The house would be sold." No one argued that point because the mortgage was small but not gone. The property taxes were late, and none of them could afford to buy out the others. Tessa had known she could not stay. Her belongings were already packed into 6 boxes in the upstairs bedroom she had used since moving in 4 years before. She had also known, in a general and foolishly hopeful way, that the family would let grief settle before dismantling the rooms. Grant pulled a red sticker from the sheet. "Mom gets first choice because she's the daughter." "Only daughter," Elaine said. "Right. So, you get second?" Tessa asked. Grant leaned back. "I didn't say that. You brought your own stickers. We all have the same stickers. Except, I'm not sure which color is mine." Elaine smoothed her legal pad. "Your situation is different." There it was. Tessa's situation was always different. She had used Evelyn's electricity. She had slept under Evelyn's roof. She had accepted grocery money twice when the diner cut her shifts. The unpaid appointments, baths, medications, laundry, and midnight calls existed in the family's accounting only as evidence that Tessa had not held a serious job. Elaine gave her a gentle look. "You've already had time with everything in the house." "I didn't realize time was a lamp. That isn't what I mean." Grant cleared his throat. "Nobody's trying to cheat anybody. We'll sell the big assets, settle what needs settling, and split what's left. This is personal property." He said personal property as if hosting a program about probate. Kendra touched his arm. "Maybe Tessa should pick something first." Tessa looked at her surprised. Kendra shrugged. She was here. Grant's face tightened, but only for a second. "Sure, that's fine." The permission made Tessa want nothing. Elaine chose the walnut dining set after confirming twice that it was walnut. Grant tagged Evelyn's bedroom dresser, her record cabinet, and a brass floor lamp he claimed would suit his office. Kendra quietly removed his sticker from the lamp when he went upstairs and placed it on a lopsided ceramic bird Evelyn had made in the 70s. They spent 3 hours moving from room to room. Tessa took the brown coffee mug. "That's all?" Elaine asked. "For now. You don't have to perform indifference. I'm not performing." Grant opened a cupboard and whistled at the stacks of pottery. "We should sell this as a lot." Some of it's useful, Tessa said. It's all useful if somebody pays. Mom used to get good money for her pieces, Elaine said. This isn't her gallery work. Grant lifted a mixing bowl and frowned at a dark drip in the glaze. This is everyday stuff. Tessa took the bowl from him before he chipped it against the shelf. Everyday stuff was most of her work. Well, we'll have a dealer look at the signed ones. He turned the bowl over. No wren. The studio stood 30 yards beyond the back porch, past the pecan tree and the strip of gravel where Evelyn used to rinse clay tools with the hose. Its white paint had gone gray. One gutter hung loose, and a green stain spread down the wall beneath it. Tessa had not entered since the week before Evelyn's final hospital stay. Grant unlocked it using Evelyn's ring of keys. The smell met them first. Cold clay, dust, damp wood, something faintly mineral and scorched. Afternoon light came through the high windows and cloudy bars. Shelves crowded every wall. Bowls waited beneath brittle plastic. Buckets sat sealed under crusted lids. The kick wheel occupied its familiar place near the sink, with Evelyn's stool tucked beneath it. Elaine remained at the threshold. "Oh," she said softly. For one hopeful second, Tessa thought the room had reached her. Then Elaine covered her nose. "This all has to be hauled away." Grant walked to the kiln and knocked on its metal casing. "Ancient." "Don't do that," Tessa said. He knocked again, lighter. "What? Will it wake up? It could damage the brick. The brick is already damaged." "You don't know what you're looking at." Grant turned. He had enough decency to appear wounded. "I'm trying to figure out what we're dealing with." "No. You're deciding it's garbage faster than I can tell you what it is." Elaine stepped between them without entering the room. "Then, tell us, is any of this valuable?" Tessa looked around at glaze tests, warped plates, tools worn to the shape of Evelyn's grip. Valuable was the wrong word, but it was the only one they had brought. "I don't know," she said. Grant nodded, as if she had confirmed something. "The buyers will want the outbuilding empty. I can put a dumpster beside it once we list." "No. Tess. No dumpster. You have somewhere to put all this?" She didn't. She had $86 until payday, and an apartment with a kitchen narrow enough to open either the oven or the refrigerator, but not both. Elaine hugged her arms. "What if the studio is your personal property choice? All of it. Then nobody touches anything without your permission." Grant glanced at her. "Mom, you called it junk. I called most of it junk." Tessa heard the trap and stepped into it anyway. "Fine," she said. "The studio is mine." Grant gave a short laugh. "Congratulations. You just inherited a cleanup bill." Behind him, on the dusty workbench, lay Evelyn's little brass wren stamp. Tessa picked it up after they left. It was colder than she expected, and small enough to disappear when she closed her hand. She carried the stamp upstairs and set it on the dresser beside the brown mug. In the bedroom's thin evening light, the wren looked less like a bird than a scratch with ambitions. Tessa opened one of her packing boxes and put it inside. Then she took it back out. By midnight, it had occupied the dresser, her coat pocket, the windowsill, and finally the mug, where it landed among the 3 dead pens she had retrieved from the kitchen. Evelyn would have called this dithering. She had a word for every variety of hesitation, most of them less polite. Tessa slept badly and woke to hammering. She found Grant on a ladder beneath the loose studio gutter. He had changed from loafers to work boots and wore a gray sweatshirt with Rowan Residential printed across the back. "What are you doing?" "Good morning to you too. It's 7:15. I've been up since 5. That's not an answer. It's a cry for help." Grant hooked the gutter back onto a bracket and drove in a screw. "The realtor's coming tomorrow. It looks neglected." "It is neglected. Buyers don't need that confirmed from the road." Tessa wrapped her arms around herself. The grass was silver with frost, and she was wearing Evelyn's old cardigan over her diner uniform. "You said the building would probably be torn down. Probably doesn't mean we photograph it falling apart." "You didn't ask me." Grant looked down from the ladder. "About fixing a gutter? It's my studio." That made him pause. Not long, but long enough for her to hate how childish the sentence sounded. "The contents are yours," he said. "The building is part of the property." That distinction showed up fast. "I'm trying to sell the house, Tess. That benefits you." "Eventually?" "Yes, eventually. That's how selling works." He drove another screw. Tessa flinched at the vibration traveling through the siding. Grant noticed. "I'm not hurting anything. You don't know that. It's a gutter, not open heart surgery. She wanted to tell him that careless impact could crack greenware drying on the shelves, except nothing in the studio had been green for months. Maybe years. She had no idea which pieces were stable, which glazes were usable, or whether the kiln's damaged fire brick mattered. Grant knew it too. "I have to work," she said. "Then go work." She made it halfway to her car before he called after her. "Hey, I brought boxes." She turned. 6 heavy produce boxes sat beneath the pecan tree, flattened and tied with twine. "From Kendra's restaurant," Grant said. "They're clean." Kendra managed the dining room at an Italian place in town. Grant tended to describe it as their restaurant when he wanted a reservation, and her job when she worked holidays. "Tell her thanks. I got them." Then, "Thank you." He nodded once and returned to the gutter. At the Sunny Cup, Patrice had saved Tessa a biscuit wrapped in foil and written "Eat this" on it in black marker. Patrice was the morning manager, a broad-shouldered woman with silver braids and a laugh that made customers turn around even when they weren't included. "You look haunted," she said, as Tessa tied on her apron. "I inherited property." "Oh no, it's a pottery studio." Patrice considered that. "That sounds better. It has no plumbing that works, a kiln that might explode, and enough dried clay to reconstruct a small mountain. There it is." Tessa tucked the biscuit beside the register. "Grant's fixing the gutter. The heartless bastard. He didn't ask. Monster." "You're mocking me?" "Lovingly." The first breakfast rush kept Tessa from thinking. She poured coffee, carried plates, and told 3 different men that grits could not be made less gritty. Her body knew the narrow spaces behind the counter better than her mind knew anything. Pivot, reach, refill. Smile without promising intimacy. At 10:30, Elaine entered wearing a camel-colored coat and sat in Tessa's section. Tessa brought coffee without asking. "You hate this coffee?" "I don't hate it." "You once called it burned ditch water. That was before your grandmother died." "Death improved the beans?" Elaine removed her gloves, finger by finger. "Sit down for a minute. I'm working." Patrice, passing with a tub of dirty dishes, said, "Take 5. Tessa gave her a betrayed look. "I contain multitudes," Patrice said. Elaine waited until Tessa slid into the opposite side of the booth. She pushed a folded sheet across the table. It was a list of dates in Grant's square handwriting. "Photographs tomorrow," Elaine said. "The listing should go up Friday. Grant thinks we may have an offer quickly if we price it sensibly. And we need everything out before closing. He put 6 weeks on the schedule. He told me buyers might tear down the studio. Some might keep it." "Did you tell the realtor it was a pottery studio?" "I believe Grant called it a workshop." "Of course he did." Elaine wrapped both hands around the mug, but did not drink. "I know 6 weeks isn't generous. It took Grandma 40 years to fill that room. A large portion of it is trash. You haven't crossed the threshold. I could smell it from there. That's clay. That is mildew wearing clay as a hat." Tessa almost smiled, which annoyed her more than the insult. Elaine lowered her voice. "You don't have to save everything just because she did. I know." "Do you?" The question landed too accurately. Tessa looked toward the counter. Patrice was pretending not to watch while vigorously polishing a clean spoon. Elaine continued. "Your grandmother saved bent nails. She saved 2 inches of ribbon. There is a drawer in the kitchen containing nothing but lids that fit no known container. She said throwing away a lid was how the matching container sensed weakness. That does sound like her." For a few seconds, they sat inside the same memory without fighting over it. Then Elaine reached across the table. "Come stay with me for a while. You don't need to move into that apartment immediately. We can sort the studio together on weekends." The offer startled Tessa enough that she looked at her mother's hand. Elaine's house was neat, carpeted, and always several degrees too warm. It also had a guest room that Elaine referred to as the exercise room because a stationary bicycle lived there under folded towels. "Thank you," Tessa said, "but I already paid the deposit." "With what?" "My money. I didn't mean it that way." "You did a little." Elaine withdrew her hand. "You make everything difficult to offer, and you make everything offered feel like an audit." Patrice dropped the polished spoon into a bin with unnecessary force. Elaine put her gloves back on. 6 weeks, Tessa. I'm trying to make sure you understand." "I understand." "No, you hear a threat whenever Grant speaks. and then you spend all your energy resisting the tone instead of dealing with the facts. Sometimes the tone is carrying the facts. Elaine stood. She left $5 beneath the untouched coffee. Tessa watched her cross the parking lot, hating the stiff set of her shoulders because it looked too much like Evelyn's. That afternoon, Tessa began with the floor. There were clay trimmings under the wheels, dead moths in the window tracks, and a collapsed cardboard box whose bottom had fused to the concrete. She filled 2 trash bags without touching anything remotely meaningful. Molded sponges, cracked plastic, a nest made from shredded invoices, 12 single gloves, all for the right hand. At the bottom of a cabinet, she found Evelyn's good left-handed trimming tool wrapped in a washcloth. Tessa carried it to the workbench, then stood with it in her palm. She remembered buying it for Evelyn after the arthritis worsened in her dominant hand. Evelyn had opened the package, examined the blade, and said, "The angle is strange." "You use your left hand strangely," Tessa had replied. For 2 weeks, the tool remained untouched. Then it began appearing beside the wheel, wet with slip. Evelyn never mentioned it. Tessa placed it in a box marked "Keep." By 4, the studio had become colder than outdoors. She found a small space heater beneath the sink, plugged it in, and blew dust across the room with such violence that she had to open the door. Kendra arrived while Tessa was coughing into her sleeve. I could see the cloud from the driveway. "It's a controlled atmosphere. Should it sparkle like that?" "Only if I've inhaled enough of it." Kendra stepped inside carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. She wore black trousers from work and shoes too nice for the studio floor. Without ceremony, she handed Tessa a cup. "Grant told you about this morning? He said you came outside dressed like somebody's furious librarian. That was Grandma's cardigan." "I know." Kendra walked carefully between the boxes. She was a tidy person, but not a squeamish one. She picked up the trash bag, tested its weight, and tied it shut. "You don't have to help," Tessa said. "I brought the boxes." Grant took credit. "I assumed he would. It's how we divide labor. There was affection under it, or habit. With Grant and Kendra, Tessa often couldn't tell. They worked without much talking. Kendra wrapped finished pieces in old newspapers, while Tessa decided which pile they belonged in. Keep, sell, use, unknown. The last category expanded until it occupied half the room. Kendra lifted a pale blue pitcher. "This is beautiful!" Tessa checked the bottom. The wren was pressed near the foot. "Finished work goes in the house for the estate sale." Kendra held it closer. "Do you agree with that?" "No." "Then why are you doing it?" "Because if I object to every piece, Grant will say I'm trying to steal from everybody." Kendra's expression changed. He wouldn't say steal. He'd say I was confusing access with ownership. That does sound more like him. Tessa took the pitcher and set it in the finished workbox. At dusk, Grant came to carry the boxes into the house. He praised how much progress they had made and did not seem to notice Tessa had done most of it. Kendra corrected him twice. The third time, she let it pass. He hoisted the box containing the blue pitcher. "Careful," Tessa said. "I've got it. The bottom's weak. I've got it." The cardboard gave way on the path. Tessa heard the pitcher break before she saw it. A clean, intimate crack. Grant froze with the empty box in his arms, while pale blue pieces settled into the gravel. Nobody spoke. Grant lowered the box. "You said these were clean." "I said they came from a restaurant," Kendra replied. Tessa crouched and picked up the handle. The break ran through the wren, leaving one wing on the pitcher's body and the other on a triangular shard. Grant knelt across from her. "I'm sorry." She kept gathering pieces. "I mean it, Tess. Get another box. I should have supported the bottom. Yes, I'll pay for it." The words were so wrong that she looked up. Grant saw it. "I know. That was stupid." Kendra went for a broom. Grant remained kneeling in the gravel, picking up the smallest blue fragments with his bare fingers. He cut his thumb and sucked in a breath. "Leave those," Tessa said. "I can get them. You're bleeding. It's barely anything." He kept picking them up. Later, after everyone left, Tessa carried the broken pitcher back into the studio. She considered throwing it away. Instead, she placed the pieces on the workbench and fitted the handle to the body. The wren became whole if she held the shard at exactly the right angle. The break still showed. Tessa let the pieces separate and opened the first cabinet above the glaze table. Inside were rows of cloudy jars, each labeled in Evelyn's narrow handwriting. Behind them sat a stack of black notebooks swollen with damp. Tessa pulled the top one free. Its cover stuck to the book beneath it, then released with a sound like tearing cloth. She opened to a page crowded with firing temperatures, glaze ratios, and blunt notes in the margins. Too hot. Runs at foot. Tessa rushing again. She stood very still, one dusty hand pressed against the paper. Then she turned the page. The next page was worse. Handles pulled too wet. 3 cracked. Tessa trimmed 6, too acceptable. Blue slip contaminated, check scoop. At the bottom, beneath a sketch of a bowl profile, Evelyn had written, "T knows this shape better than she thinks. Stops listening when nervous." Tessa read the sentence 3 times and disliked it differently each time. It was not praise. Evelyn could have written good or ready or even improving. Instead, she had managed to sound critical in a note nobody was supposed to see. Tessa turned more pages. The notebook covered nearly a year. Most entries were technical and compressed, written for a future Evelyn who apparently needed no verbs. Cone 6. Slow, cool, more silica next test. Tessa appeared in the margins like unreliable weather. T made handles. T forgot wax. T caught kiln noise before I did. On one page, Evelyn had listed 18 pieces by number. Beside each was either an X, a question mark, or a tiny wren. Tessa recognized the batch. They had worked through a humid August, preparing an order for a restaurant. Evelyn had thrown the bowls in the mornings before her hands swelled. Tessa trimmed them after her diner shifts and pulled every handle for the matching soup cups. She had thought Evelyn marked all of them. According to the notebook, 7 had been rejected. Tessa looked toward the broken blue pitcher. Until that moment, she had remembered Evelyn's standards as a wall built specifically in front of her. The notebook suggested Evelyn had also built it in front of herself. That should have felt comforting. It didn't. She carried 3 notebooks to the farmhouse, then brought them back because the house no longer felt safe for anything she wanted. She stacked them beneath the workbench, away from the damp wall, and placed an empty glaze bucket on top as camouflage. Over the next several days, the studio divided itself into smaller problems. The sink drain worked if she did not ask it to work quickly. The wheel turned but made a clicking sound every 7th rotation. The kiln lid had a hairline crack near the hinge, and one of the fire bricks inside had crumbled at the corner. Half the labeled glazes had dried into colored stone. The clay and sealed bags ranged from usable to geological. Grant came through with the realtor and called the studio a flexible bonus structure. Tessa, scraping dried slip from the floor, looked up. "It's a building." The realtor smiled with professional neutrality. Some buyers like to imagine possibilities. Grant likes to imagine square footage. Grant steered the woman back outside by discussing roof age. The listing photographs were taken without Tessa in them, though the photographer asked her to remove her car from the driveway. That evening, the farmhouse appeared online under the phrase "timeless country charm." The camera made the kitchen look large and concealed the water stain over the back stairs. There were 6 photographs of the walnut dining table and one of the studio, shot from far enough away that the loose gutter Grant had fixed was invisible. Tessa stared at the studio photograph on her phone while eating cereal in bed. It already looked like a place she used to know. She began staying out there after her shifts, wearing 2 sweaters and Evelyn's cardigan. She sorted until her fingertips split. She washed tools in a bucket because the sink backed up. Once, close to midnight, she sat at the wheel and pressed the pedal. The motor hummed. The wheel head turned. Click. It rotated. Click. Tessa set a lump of reclaimed clay in the center. She had no business wasting it. She needed to sort, label, sell, move. Instead, she wet her hands and leaned in. The clay shoved back. Her elbows floated. Her shoulders tightened. The lump bucked beneath her palms, wobbling harder each time she tried to force it into place. "Come on." Click. She pressed down. The clay escaped sideways and slapped a ribbon of gray water across her cardigan. Tessa stopped the wheel. Evelyn's voice came from memory with insulting clarity. "You're arguing with it." "I'm not arguing," Tessa said aloud. The empty studio offered no support. She started again, using less force. The wobble narrowed. For half a second, the clay moved under her hands without resisting. Then her left palm shifted, and the whole lump leaned off center. Tessa cut it from the wheel with a wire and dropped it into the reclaim bucket. She did not try again. Elaine scheduled the estate sale for Saturday and produced newspaper advertisements online listings, and small fluorescent signs. She approached the task with the grim energy of someone organizing an evacuation. On Friday night, Tessa found her pricing Evelyn's pottery at the dining table. Finished pieces stood in rows on newspaper. Red stickers marked $20, $35, $80. You put 80 on the blue vase? Tessa asked. It has the bird. They nearly all have the bird, not the ones from the kitchen. Those are still hers. Elaine checked the bottom of a brown casserole. Then, why didn't she sign them? She stamped them. And she didn't stamp everything. Why not? Tessa opened her mouth. She could have explained the lists in the notebooks, the checks, the rejected pieces. She realized she did not actually know enough to explain any of it. Some sound pieces were unmarked. Some marked ones contained tiny glaze imperfections Evelyn would have condemned in later years. The system had changed, or Evelyn had, or both. I don't know, she said. Elaine set the casserole in the $5 group. Tessa picked it up and moved it to the table with the signed work. If we overprice everything, nothing will sell, Elaine said. Then nothing sells. We cannot keep a house full of pottery. It isn't full. We opened 3 kitchen cupboards and found 47 bowls. People use bowls. Tessa, people use 4 bowls. 6 if they're entertainers. Grandma would hate that sentence. Your grandmother had an unhealthy relationship with inventory. Tessa checked the casserole's rim. There was a shallow divot beneath one handle. It was not a crack. It would not affect use, but Evelyn had probably seen it. She put it back in the $5 group. Elaine watched without comment. Grant arrived with folding tables borrowed from Kendra's restaurant. He carried them under one arm, showing off slightly, until a leg swung loose and struck the front door. Everybody calm down, he said before anyone reacted. By 9, the lawn resembled a department store, assembled after a natural disaster. Quilts hung from a clothesline. Lamps stood without outlets. Elaine arranged jewelry on a velvet tray and put a handwritten sign beside the dining table that said, Solid Walnut, Serious Inquiries. Grant added a second sign that said, Sold as set. No one was planning to buy one chair, Tessa said. You'd be surprised. I would. Kendra brought 3 bags of takeout pasta and a cash box. She also brought heavier produce cartons, reinforced at the bottom with tape. Grant kissed her cheek. Perfect. They're for Tessa. I know. You said perfect like they were for the sale. I said perfect because they're perfect. Kendra handed the boxes directly to Tessa. They ate among the lamps and tagged furniture. For a little while, it almost felt like work people might remember fondly. Grant imitated the realtor saying, flexible bonus structure. Elaine admitted she had hidden the ugliest lamp in the upstairs closet before the photographs. Tessa laughed hard enough to choke on a noodle. Then Grant raised his paper cup. To Mom. Elaine's face went still. He corrected himself. Grandma. I meant Grandma. Evelyn had been Mom to Elaine and Grandma to him. The mistake was harmless, but Elaine pushed away her pasta and began reorganizing the cash box. Tessa went outside to finish emptying the kitchen cupboards. The sale began at 8. People arrived at 7:20. They moved across the wet lawn with the alert silence of birds, lifting objects, checking labels, turning everything over. A man offered Grant $40 for the walnut table before the cash box was open. Elaine stared at him until he walked away. Tessa managed the pottery because no one else knew which pieces could be stacked safely. She answered questions that had no useful answers. Was this handmade? Yes. Could it go in the dishwasher? Probably, although Evelyn distrusted dishwashers on philosophical grounds. Why was one bowl $30 and another $5? That question took longer. At 10, Patrice arrived and bought the ceramic bird Kendra had saved from the floor lamp sticker. This thing is hideous, Patrice said with affection. It might be an ashtray. It's a bird. It has a bowl in its back. Then it's a useful bird. She paid full price and carried it away like a sacred object. By noon, the lawn was trampled, and Elaine's serious inquiries had produced nothing serious. Grant began consolidating boxes. Without asking, he took the plain kitchen pieces Tessa had set near the porch and moved them onto a folding table beside the studio. $3 each, he said. We need volume. They're not soda cans. They're also not moving. They weren't priced. Now they are. Tessa was too tired to fight over every bowl. She wrote kitchen stuff, $3 on a piece of cardboard, and returned to wrapping a set of mugs. The woman in the faded green jacket arrived shortly after 1. Tessa noticed her, because she ignored Elaine's sales greeting. She moved through the tables without the nervous touching most people did, hands in her pockets, looking only long enough to dismiss things. At the pottery display, she stopped. She picked up a gray bowl. By the time she asked about Evelyn's mark, Grant was beside the cash box, and Tessa had glaze on her sleeve from opening a bucket that morning. The woman asked if Tessa had made the bowl. Tessa admitted she had helped. Then came the question that made Grant laugh under his breath. "Can you still make them?" Tessa should have said she did not know. She should have said the kiln might be unsafe. The glazes were half ruined, and the only clay she had touched in years had defeated her after 10 minutes. She should have asked who the woman was and why one plain bowl mattered. Instead, she heard Grant's laugh and said, "Yes." The woman studied her face. "That was quick. You asked a yes or no question." "I did." She held out the bowl. "How many of these do you have?" Tessa searched the table and found 4 in the same gray, though 2 were smaller and 1 had a warped foot. The woman rejected the rocker immediately. She nested the other 3 against the first with practiced hands. "I'll take these." Grant brightened. $12? "No," Tessa said. He looked at her. "They're 3 each. They were in the studio." "You gave me the studio." The woman lowered the bowls slightly. Grant's smile did not move. "We're really doing this now? You made the sign." "Yes, for the family estate sale. With my things." Elaine had noticed. So had Kendra. A customer holding a lamp leaned closer with shameless interest. Grant took one breath. "Fine. Tessa gets the $12. The woman looked from him to Tessa. "Do I pay extra for the floor show?" Tessa almost laughed. "It's included." "Good. I'm Celia Hart." She shifted the bowls to one arm and offered Tessa her hand. Her grip was warm and dry. "I own Hart's Table over in Bellwether," she said. "And if you really can still make these, I need to talk to you." Celia did not release Tessa's hand immediately. "Evelyn's granddaughter?" "One of them," Grant said. Celia looked past Tessa. "Are you the one who makes pottery?" "No, but then I'm probably asking the right granddaughter." Kendra made a small sound that might have been a cough. Tessa took her hand back. "You knew my grandmother?" "I bought from her, mostly by telephone, which she treated as a personal inconvenience." "That sounds right." She'd answer, "Evelyn Rowan," like I'd called to accuse her of something. Tessa smiled before she meant to. Celia set the 4 bowls on the table and separated the warped one. These were restaurant ware, same clay body she used for us. This gray was one of her most dependable glazes. "River smoke," Tessa said. "That what she called it?" "That's what she wrote on the buckets. She usually called it gray." "Also sounds right." Grant came around the table. "We have more of Grandma's work inside. Signed vases, pictures, some really nice pieces. I'm sure you do. I could show you." "I came for bowls." His smile tightened by a degree. "Right. I just thought, since you knew her work, I knew the work because I stacked it, washed it, dropped it, cursed at it, and bought more of it. Art appreciation wasn't involved." Tessa looked at the bowls in Celia's hands. "You still use them?" "Every night." "How long?" "I bought the first order 19 years ago. Replaced some about 12 years back. I called again maybe 5 years ago. But your grandmother said she wasn't taking restaurant orders." Her eyes shifted to the studio. She was not nosy about it. That made Tessa more conscious of the open door, the visible boxes, the wheel under its dusty cover. "I've been looking for her market sales ever since," Celia continued. "There are plenty of pretty dishes out there. Pretty isn't the problem. What is? Pretty gets chipped by the second Saturday." Grant picked up one of the $3 mugs and turned it over. "So, the bird makes them more valuable?" Celia gave him a patient look. "No. The person who knew when to use it did." That quieted him. Tessa felt the brass stamp sitting in the brown mug upstairs, though she could not have explained why the thought embarrassed her. "Are the unmarked pieces seconds?" Celia asked. "Some. Experiments, maybe. Unfinished batches." Tessa touched the rim of the gray bowl. "Not all?" "This one's good. The foot is rough. I can fix a rough foot. I can't fix bad balance." Celia cradled the bowl against her palm, fingers spread beneath it. She lifted it to chest height, tipped it as if scooping from one side, then set it down. Tessa knew that motion. Evelyn used to test soup bowls with a handful of dried beans, carrying them around the studio while complaining that half the potters in America had never met a server. Celia pulled a business card from her jacket. The edges were softened from living in a pocket. Hart's table. Celia Hart, owner. A bellwether address and telephone number appeared beneath. Come see me Monday after lunch. Tessa took the card. Why? Because I need bowls. You said that, and you said you can make them. Grant leaned one hip against the table. She hasn't done production work in a while. Tessa looked at him. Nobody asked. I'm just saying you should know what you're agreeing to. Celia's gaze stayed on Tessa. Should I? I know what I'm agreeing to. She did not. Celia seemed to know that, but allowed the lie to stand. Monday, Celia said. 2 o'clock. Bring one of these if your family permits it to cross the property line. She paid Tessa $12. Grant watched the bills change hands with an expression usually reserved for plumbing estimates that had grown during the conversation. Celia tucked 3 bowls into her canvas bag. She left the warped one on the table. This yours too? Tessa nodded. You can keep it. The sale ran another 4 hours. The dining table did not sell. The blue vase did, for $60, after Elaine accepted that the buyer had no intention of paying $80. Patrice returned near closing with 2 sandwiches and bought a $5 casserole she claimed matched her bird. Grant sold the brass lamp he had wanted for his office, and then acted relieved because, he said, it would have been a pain to rewire. When the last car left, there were rectangles of flattened grass where the tables had stood, and a pale circle around every unsold planter. Elaine counted the money in the kitchen. Grant carried boxes. Kendra peeled price stickers from pieces they had decided to keep. Tessa reached for a box of unmarked bowls. Grant set his hand on it. We need to clarify something. They're mine. See, that's the thing. We were talking about tools and supplies. We were talking about everything in the studio. You didn't know there was saleable inventory. Neither did you. I knew there could be. You called it junk. I said mostly junk. Everybody keeps editing out that word. Elaine continued counting, but more slowly. Tessa pulled the box toward herself. Grant did not let go. Kendra looked between them. Grant. I'm not taking it. I'm saying finished pieces made by Grandma are estate property. The finished pieces we moved into the house were sold as estate property, Tessa said. These stayed in the studio, because we didn't have room on the table, because you didn't think they were worth anything until somebody asked for them. That woman paid $3 apiece. $12, Elaine said. Grant looked at her. She bought 4. She left 1. She paid for 4. Elaine placed a rubber band around the bills and wrote the total on her legal pad. The box is Tessa's. Relief came so unexpectedly that Tessa almost missed what followed. But, Elaine said, anything else your grandmother completed should be separated. We agreed to give you the studio contents because we thought they were materials and old equipment. If there is finished work, it belongs with her personal effects. Even the ugly work? Tessa asked. This isn't about ugly. It was this morning. Kendra peeled a red sticker from her thumbnail. What about the pieces Tessa worked on? Grant released the box. How do we know which those are? The notebooks waited beneath the studio workbench, but Tessa did not mention them. Evelyn's entries recorded tasks, not ownership. Tea-trimmed 6 was not a claim. Tea-made handles did not transform a mug into hers. We don't, she said. Grant spread his hands. That's my point. No, your point changes every time something might be worth money. His face flushed. And yours changes every time you decide being hurt means you're right. The kitchen went still. Grant looked sorry at once, which made it worse. Tessa lifted the box. I'm taking these. Nobody stopped her. Monday at 2, Hart's table was closed between lunch and dinner, but the front door stood unlocked. Tessa entered carrying the gray bowl in both hands. The dining room was narrower than she expected. Dark wooden tables stood in 2 rows beneath mismatched pendant lights. The walls held frame menus, old photographs of Bellwether, and a collection of chipped plates mounted above the bar. It was not fashionable enough to feel staged or shabby enough to feel charming. It looked used. Celia appeared through a swinging door with a dish towel over one shoulder. You came. You told me to. People treat that as optional. Tessa held out the bowl. Celia did not take it. Bring it back here. The kitchen smelled of onions, bleach, and toasted garlic. Steel counters crowded the room. A man chopping parsley raised 2 fingers in greeting without stopping. Celia led Tessa to a dish rack. Bowls stood on their sides in plastic slots. Cream, brown, gray, blue. Most carried Evelyn's wren underneath. The gray ones were close to the bowl Tessa had brought, but years of use had softened their glaze to a satin finish. Celia pulled one free. A pale line crossed its rim. "This one's done after tonight." Tessa ran her nail over the line. "That isn't a crack. Not yet. Heat it, cool it, hit it against the rinse sink another 40 times. You should stop using it now. I wanted to see if you'd say that. Is this an interview? It's a bowl." Celia set it in a discard crate beneath the counter. 3 other Evelyn pieces were already there, each chipped or cracked beyond safe use. Tessa hated seeing them in a plastic crate. She also knew they belonged there. "I need 24 wide bowls," Celia said. 10 inches, give or take. Enough foot that they don't trap water in the rack. Not so much curve that my cooks build everything into a pile. River smoke, something close. I'm not asking you to counterfeit your grandmother. The word struck harder than Celia seemed to intend. "I know. I want 4 samples first. I'll use them for 2 weeks. Dishwasher, hot holding, stacked storage, normal abuse. If they work, we discuss the full order and I pay a deposit. How much?" For the samples? For all of it. Celia named a price per bowl. Tessa did the arithmetic. It was fair, perhaps better than fair, but nowhere near enough to make failure romantic. Clay, glaze materials, electricity, replacement kiln elements, packing, transportation. The first 4 would cost her money she did not have before they earned anything. "When do you need them?" "Samples in 3 weeks. Full order by the beginning of October. That's tight. That's why I'm not pretending it's a favor." Tessa looked at the racks of marked bowls. One had a handle she had pulled. She recognized the slight upward kick where her thumb used to leave the clay too thick. Celia waited. "I can do 4, Tessa said. "Good. I didn't say 24. You don't get 2 yet." Back at the studio, Tessa wrote the dimensions on a sheet of butcher paper and taped it above the wheel. She found the river smoke recipe in the damp notebook, then gathered the labeled jars Evelyn had used. Flint, whiting, feldspar, red iron oxide. The quantities made sense. The materials did not. Some were old enough that their labels had changed color. Tessa set them in a row anyway. She retrieved the rejected lump from the reclaim bucket, wedged it on the table, and sat at the wheel. Click. The clay shifted beneath her hands. Click. "You're arguing with it," she whispered. This time, when it pushed, she listened. It settled by degrees, the wobble shrinking beneath her palms until the clay turned without trying to escape. Tessa held her breath. The wheel clicked. She eased her thumbs into the center and opened the clay. The floor grew too thin almost immediately. She felt it give, corrected too fast, and pulled the wall higher than the base could support. The bowl sagged outward like a tired hat. "Okay," she said. That was information. She cut it off and began again. The second bowl split at the rim. The third rose evenly, then developed a twist because her right hand outran her left. The fourth was too narrow. The fifth became something respectable enough that she stopped the wheel and stared at it. It was not Evelyn's bowl. Evelyn's shape widened low and then lifted through a shallow curve, generous without looking clumsy. Tessa's had straighter sides and a nervous little lip. It looked like a bowl trying to behave at a formal dinner. She kept it anyway. By 1 in the morning, 7 damp forms occupied the wearboard. None matched, but 3 shared enough family resemblance to avoid embarrassment. Tessa covered them with plastic, washed the worst of the clay from her arms, and slept for 4 hours in the farmhouse. At the sunny cup, she dropped a side of toast on a customer's trousers. The toast landed butter side up, which Patrice called divine intervention. The customer disagreed and demanded his breakfast be removed from the bill. "The toast didn't stain you," Tessa said. "It touched my pants. So is the chair." Patrice took over before Tessa converted the incident into unemployment. In the kitchen, she handed Tessa a mug of coffee and leaned against the prep counter. "You're mean when you're tired. I'm efficient. You compared a man to furniture. He started it. He was eating eggs." Tessa drank the coffee. It had been sitting long enough to become bitter, and she drank it anyway. Patrice looked at the clay under her fingernails. "You making things?" "Possibly." "That's not an answer. I have to make 4 bowls. 4 sounds possible. I have to make 4 good bowls. To get 4 good ones, I need to make at least 12. Based on last night, maybe 40. What happens if you make them? A restaurant tests them. What happens if the restaurant likes them? They order 24. Patrice's eyebrows rose. And then I panic at a higher level. Patrice smiled. There she is. Tessa picked up a clean towel and folded it, though there was a stack already folded beside her. I told the woman I could do it. Can you? Grandma could. I didn't ask that. Tessa flattened the towel's corners. Patrice took it away from her. You know this thing where somebody doubts you so you make a promise to punish them? I don't do that. You drop toast on a man because he said his eggs looked wet. They were over easy. Do you have the money to make 40 bowls? Tessa looked toward the swinging door. That's what I thought, Patrice said. The practical damage began at the pottery supply store. 2 bags of stoneware clay cost more than Tessa remembered. The glaze ingredients Evelyn had stored were usable only if Tessa trusted labels written 6 or 7 years earlier, and trust had a price measured in failed work. New kiln elements would take most of her remaining paycheck. Shelving supports, wax resist, grinding pads, and replacement sponges added smaller insults. Tessa removed the sponges from the counter. The cashier looked at her cracked fingertips. You need the sponges. I have sponges. You have yellow fossils. You've seen my sponges? I've seen everybody's sponges. Tessa put one back on the counter. She paid with the money meant for groceries and carried the clay to her car 1 bag at a time. On the drive home, her fuel light came on. Grant's truck was parked beside the studio. He stood inside with a tape measure, studying the wall behind Evelyn's work table. A man Tessa did not know crouched near the sink. What's happening? Grant folded the tape. Inspection. The crouching man lifted 2 fingers. Plumbing. The house is under contract? We got an offer this morning. Tessa should have been pleased. A quick sale meant less mortgage interest, fewer taxes, less money disappearing before the split. Instead, she looked at the bags of clay in her arms and heard 6 weeks collapse into a door shutting. What's the closing date? 31 days, assuming everything stays clean. You said 6 weeks. I said that was the schedule. We can ask for more time if we need it, but buyers don't love storage arrangements. This isn't storage. The plumber rose and wiped his hands on a rag. Drain's dry. It isn't, Tessa said. It's slow. He looked at Grant, not her. Supply lines galvanized. If they keep the sink, I'd replace it. If this comes down, cap it at the house. Grant thanked him and walked him outside. Tessa put the clay on the floor. When Grant returned, he closed the door behind him as if weather were their primary concern. 31 days is still time. I have a restaurant order. He blinked. From the estate sale woman, samples first. How many? 4. His shoulders relaxed. 4 bowls, 4 tested bowls, and then 24 if they pass. Grant glanced at the wheel, the damp forms under plastic, the line of glaze materials. Something like reassessment crossed his face, followed quickly by caution. What are they paying? Tessa laughed once. There you are. I'm asking because this could affect how we sort Grandma's remaining work. It doesn't. If you're fulfilling one of her old customer relationships using her designs, I'm making samples. With her clay? With clay I bought an hour ago. Her glaze recipe? Tessa looked at him. Grant rubbed the back of his neck. I'm not trying to claim your 4 bowls. How generous. I'm trying to think ahead. Try it somewhere else. He moved toward the door, then stopped beside the wearboard. His hand hovered over the plastic without touching. These yours? Yes. They look good. Tessa wanted the compliment enough to distrust it. They're wet, she said. Wet clay can still become anything, including trash. Grant gave her a tired smile. Runs in the family, I guess. She almost threw a sponge at him. He left before she decided. The bowls dried too quickly around the rims and too slowly at the feet. Tessa spent the next day turning them beneath the plastic, trying to even the moisture. She threw 9 more. Her hands remembered faster than her confidence did. By the 3rd evening, she could feel an off-center base before she saw it. She stopped fighting height into the walls and let the clay widen. Evelyn's profile began to appear. That was the unsettling part. Tessa had expected skill to feel like ownership. Instead, every correct motion felt borrowed. She trimmed the first 7 and lost 2. 1 foot cut through. Another bowl cracked when she set it down too hard. She swore, crushed both pieces into the reclaim bucket, and heard Evelyn tell her that anger made expensive mud. The remaining 5 received numbers written in pencil beneath their feet. T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. She opened the notebooks and found the river smoke tests. Evelyn had adjusted the recipe repeatedly. Beside one version, she had written, B says more iron, which was both technical information and a person Tessa had spent years pretending not to remember. Bernice Hale had once occupied the second stool in the studio. Tessa's memories of her came from her early 20s. Short gray-streaked hair, red-framed glasses, heavy boots in every season. Bernice made angular serving pieces that Evelyn called dramatic when she was being polite. They argued about glazes, prices, music, lunch, and whether a handle could be too comfortable. Then, one winter, the second stool disappeared. Evelyn stopped saying Bernice's name. If asked, she said, Bernice wanted her own way, which described everyone who had ever disagreed with Evelyn. Tessa found B throughout the old notebooks. B, mixed batch. B says slower cool. B wrong about Rudel. Then, abruptly, nothing. Tessa carried the notebook to the farmhouse. Elaine was wrapping the unsold blue vase in a beach towel. Why do you look like that? Like what? Like you found a snake. Do you know where Bernice Hale lives? Elaine pulled the towel tighter around the vase. Why? I need to ask her about a glaze. You don't want to involve Bernice. That's not an address. She and your grandmother had a terrible falling out. About what? I never got a straight answer. Did you ask? Of course I asked. Grandma once told you the moon landing was poorly timed because she had a firing that evening. Asking wasn't enough. Elaine tucked the towel ends beneath the vase. Bernice accused her of taking over everything. Your grandmother accused Bernice of walking away when the studio was struggling. Money was mentioned, credit was mentioned, character was mentioned extensively. So, they were partners for a while. Why did everyone call it Grandma's studio? Because Bernice left. The simplicity of that answer bothered Tessa. Elaine carried the vase toward the dining room. Tessa followed. Do you have her number? No. Do you know anyone who does? Tessa, I have 31 days to move the studio, 3 weeks to produce samples, and a kiln I don't know how to repair. I can't protect Grandma from being mad at me. Elaine stopped. For once, she did not answer quickly. She lowered the vase onto the table and kept both hands on it. Your grandmother wasn't only mad, she said. She was hurt. Those weren't different things with her. They were if you were the one getting punished. The room seemed to narrow around them. Tessa wanted to ask who Elaine meant. Bernice. Herself. All of them. Instead, she said, I still need her number. Elaine sighed and opened a drawer beneath the telephone desk. She removed an address book with a cracked green cover and thumbed through it. She used to live on County Road 9. Used to? This is old. Everything in this house is old. Elaine wrote a number on the back of an estate sale price sticker. She kept her finger over it when Tessa reached. Do not tell her I encourage this. You didn't. Good. Tessa called from the studio before she could lose her nerve. A woman answered after 6 rings. Hello? Is this Bernice Hale? A pause. Who wants to know? My name is Tessa Rowan. The silence changed. I know who you are, Bernice said. Tessa gripped the price sticker between 2 fingers. I'm working in Evelyn's studio. No, you're cleaning it out. I'm trying to use the test kiln. That thing should have been rewired years ago. Then I'm talking to the right person. No, you're talking to the person who already left. Tessa looked at the numbered bowls. I need 4 samples, she said. River Smoke, 10-inch restaurant bowls. I found your notes in Grandma's books. My notes. She wrote that you wanted more iron. Of course she wrote it like that. Were you right? Bernice was quiet for so long, Tessa thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Don't turn on that kiln. The line went dead. Tessa called back. The telephone rang until an automated voice invited her to leave a message. You can't say something like that and hang up, Tessa said after the beep. Which kiln? Why? Is it the wiring, the bricks, the elements, the controller? There are 2 kilns here, Bernice. Call me. She ended the call, then unplugged the little electric test kiln from the wall. The larger gas kiln occupied a fireproofed room at the rear of the studio, behind a heavy metal door Evelyn used to prop open with half a cinder block. Tessa had not touched it. Dust covered the burners. A bird's nest filled part of the outside vent, and one section of the gas line had turned the color of an old penny. Even Grant would recognize that as a warning. The test kiln looked less threatening. It was round and squat, with a hinged lid, new elements still boxed beside it, and enough space inside for 4 bowls if Tessa arranged them carefully. Evelyn had used it for glaze tests and small batches after the gas kiln became too demanding. Tessa crouched and followed the power cord to the outlet. The rubber near the plug had cracked into tiny squares. She sat back on her heels. "All right," she told the kiln. "You win until morning." Bernice arrived before 8. Tessa was asleep in Evelyn's studio chair, with her feet on an overturned bucket, when 3 hard knocks struck the door. She startled awake, upsetting a notebook and a bag of clay tools. Bernice stood outside in a brown canvas coat and heavy black boots. Her hair was shorter and whiter than Tessa remembered, but the red glasses were the same. She carried a metal toolbox in one hand and a cardboard tray with 2 coffees in the other. "You look terrible," she said. "I was sleeping. I noticed. I called you back." "I noticed that too." Bernice pushed a coffee into Tessa's hand and entered without waiting. She stopped just inside. The room had been changing daily. Empty shelves now showed pale rectangles where jars had stood. Boxes lined one wall, numbered bowls dried beneath plastic near the wheel. To Tessa, the losses were everywhere. Bernice seemed to see what remained. Her gaze moved from the glazed table to Evelyn's stool, then to the cracked blue pitcher laid in pieces on the bench. She took off her glasses, cleaned them on her shirt, and put them back on. "You kept the bad sink," she said. "Good morning. That drain backed up when Reagan was president. It still does." Evelyn said slow water encouraged patience. "She told me the pipes were narrow because older plumbing was more refined." Bernice made a sound deep in her throat. Of course she did. She set down her toolbox beside the test kiln. Tessa held up her coffee. "Did you come here to help?" "I came here to prevent a fire. Those can overlap. Don't get optimistic." Bernice examined the plug first, bending the cord just enough to expose the cracked insulation. She removed the access panel and stared at the wiring without touching it. "When did this last fire?" "I don't know." "Excellent. Grandma used it after she stopped using the big kiln. That isn't a date. She didn't record everything." Bernice looked toward the notebooks under the workbench. She recorded what everyone else did. Tessa pretended not to hear that. Bernice tested the cord and switches with a meter from her toolbox. She checked the elements, the lid, the crumbling brick Tessa had noticed, and the thermocouple extending into the chamber. "You bought replacements? The elements are in the box. These are the wrong resistance." The store looked up the model. "The plate on the side isn't original. We rebuilt this from 2 kilns." Tessa stared at the unopened box. "Can I return them?" "If you didn't bleed on them." "I only cried near them. Moisture damage." Bernice's face remained solemn for 1 second too long. Tessa laughed despite herself. "Cord has to go," Bernice said. "Switch is worn. Thermocouple's bent, but it might read. The brick can be patched for testing, not for production. I need 4 bowls. You need more than 4 bowls to get 4 bowls. I made 14. Bernice glanced at the wearboard. "You made 14 wet opportunities." Patrice was more encouraging. "Patrice doesn't know clay. She knows me." Bernice straightened. "Those aren't always the same expertise." She moved toward the rear firing room. Tessa followed with her coffee. The gas kiln stood waist-high on its brick base. Evelyn and Bernice had built it from insulating fire brick, enclosed in a rusting steel frame. Tessa remembered firings that lasted all day and into the night. The studio warm enough to make winter disappear. Evelyn watched the flame through a spy hole, listening to the burners as if they were giving testimony. Bernice crouched near the pipe, but did not touch it. "No. You haven't inspected it. I have eyes. If the line gets replaced, vent is blocked. Burners need cleaning. Frame has shifted on that corner. See the crack through the brick?" Tessa saw it after Bernice pointed. "You don't fire this on a deadline," Bernice said. "You don't fire it in a building somebody is about to buy. You have it inspected, repair what's repairable, and decide whether moving it makes more sense than rebuilding. I have 28 days. Then you don't have a gas kiln." The sentence closed off half the room. Tessa returned to the wheel area and pulled the plastic from her bowls. "What about the test kiln? We can make it safe enough for samples. Small loads, slow firing. You stay with it. How long to fix? If you return the elements and get the right parts, a few days. I don't have a few days. Then call the restaurant and say you were wrong." Tessa looked at her. Bernice lifted one shoulder. "That's an adult option. It isn't mine." "No." Evelyn hated it too. "I'm not doing this because she would. You're using her clay body, her glaze recipe, her shape, her customer, And her studio. Let's not act like she's uninvolved. The clay is mine. Bernice looked almost pleased. Good. One thing. Tessa pulled the butcher paper from above the wheel and handed it to her. The dimensions were written beside rough sketches, shrinkage calculations, and the price Celia had offered. Bernice read everything. Heart's table, she said. You know Celia? Everybody who sold her plates knows Celia. She brings back chipped work and makes you look at it. She put one in a discard crate just to see if I'd object. She always did enjoy an audition. You sold to her? Evelyn and I did. The and I settled between them. Tessa pointed at the river smoke recipe in the open notebook. Was the extra iron right? No. Grandma wrote that you said, I said more iron after she changed the feldspar. She changed it back without telling me, kept the iron, and turned a full load the color of dried blood. That batch isn't in here. It wouldn't be. Why? Because it was her mistake. Tessa picked up the first dry bowl. You don't like her? Bernice took the bowl from her. I loved your grandmother for 12 years. Then I disliked her for 15. Both required attention. She ran her fingers beneath the rim. Too heavy here. It's a restaurant bowl. It's still going to be lifted. Bernice set it down and picked up the next. Foot's narrow. You haven't seen it after firing. I don't need to? That was one of Grandma's most annoying sentences. It was mine first. The third bowl passed without comment until Bernice placed it on the table and tapped the rim. It gave a dull, uneven note. Thickness changes on that side. I know. Then why did you keep it? I need 4. You need 4 good ones. Tessa heard Evelyn so clearly that anger rose before she could separate past from present. Did she teach you how to speak like that, or did you teach her? Bernice's hand stilled. Tessa expected her to leave. Instead, Bernice walked to the reclaim bucket, dropped the flawed bowl in, and crushed it with one fist. Throw 6 more, she said. I have a shift at 11. Then throw 4. I need to change. 3. Tessa sat at the wheel. Bernice pulled Evelyn's second stool from beneath a stack of empty boxes and placed it several feet away. She did not sit close enough to guide Tessa's hands. She drank her coffee and watched. The first bowl widened too quickly. Slow down, Bernice said. Tessa corrected. Not because I said it, because the bass is telling you. I can't hear the bass. Then your hands are too loud. That doesn't mean anything. It will. The second bowl was better. On the third, Tessa centered the clay, opened it, and lifted without checking Bernice's face. You brace differently, Bernice said. Than Grandma? Than you used to. You remember? You were 23, not vapor. Tessa kept her eyes on the turning clay. She never said you noticed me. Evelyn rarely admitted anybody noticed anything first. The bowl rose beneath Tessa's fingers. She widened it low, then lifted the curve. When she finished the rim, Bernice reached over and stopped the wheel with the side of one finger. That one, she said. The approval was so spare it felt familiar enough to hurt. They spent the rest of the morning making a parts list. Bernice crossed out half of what the supply store had sold Tessa and added items she insisted they could salvage from the studio. She found the kiln's original manual in a drawer beneath old firing cones. Its cover bore 2 names in black marker, Evelyn Rowan, Bernice Hale. Tessa touched the second name. Did you build all this together? Not all. How much? Bernice shut the manual. Today, we're fixing the little kiln. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. At the door, she stopped beside the broken pitcher. That blue always crawled if it went on thick, she said. It didn't crawl. No. Evelyn learned. From you? Bernice put on her gloves. Sometimes. She left the toolbox behind. For the first time since Tessa had called her, that felt like an answer. The toolbox stayed where Bernice left it, a square blue promise Tessa did not trust until Bernice returned the next afternoon, carrying a paper sack of electrical parts. You found the right elements? Tessa asked. I found someone willing to wind them. How much? Bernice named the price. Tessa closed her eyes. I could buy a functioning toaster oven for that, then make very small bowls. I already returned the wrong ones. Good, that pays for the cord. It paid for most of the cord. Luxury cord? Apparently electricity costs extra when you don't want it to kill you. Bernice set the sack down. You're learning? They worked at the kiln for 3 evenings. Bernice made Tessa disconnect the breaker, test the outlet, and test it again. They replaced the cracked cord, the worn switch, and the bent thermocouple. The new elements fit into the grooves with irritating precision until the last 6 inches, which resisted every effort. "Don't stretch it cold," Bernice said. "I'm not. You're thinking about it." Tessa lowered her hands. "Do you narrate everybody's mistakes before they make them?" "Only the expensive ones." The patch around the crumbling fire brick looked ugly but held. Bernice rejected Tessa's first 3 attempts to position the thermocouple, then moved it less than a 1/4 inch. "That's where I had it. That's where you were headed." "Is that how you and Grandma worked together? You waited for her to do something and then took credit for the destination?" Bernice handed her the screwdriver. "We alternated. The bowls dried on the shelves while they repaired the kiln." Tessa trimmed the 3 she had thrown under Bernice's supervision and made 6 more after work. 2 slumped when she moved them too soon. 1 developed a crack around the base, so thin she could see it only when she held the bowl under the work lamp. She crushed all 3 before she could bargain with herself. Bernice said nothing. That silence was worse than approval and better than being caught. On the 4th evening, they loaded the first bisque firing. The kiln would hold 4 10-inch bowls if they staggered the shelves. Tessa lowered each one with both hands. "You made the feet too tall," Bernice said. "They shrink. Everything shrinks. That doesn't make it thoughtful. You said they needed enough foot not to trap water in the dish rack. Enough isn't a synonym for nervous." Tessa repositioned a bowl. "Celia is going to abuse these for 2 weeks. A heavier foot might help. A strong foot might help. Heavy is just heavy. Grandma's were heavy. Toward the end." The words entered the kiln with the bowls. Tessa straightened. "What does that mean?" Bernice checked the shelf clearance with a ruler. "It means her hands hurt." She stopped pulling clay as thin because she couldn't hold steady pressure. She said thicker wear was coming back. She said whatever made limitations sound intentional. Tessa pictured Evelyn at the wheel, shoulders lifted, fingers stiff around a wooden rib. She had believed her because Evelyn spoke about trends with contempt, which made every opinion sound permanent. "Why didn't you help her?" Tessa asked. "I wasn't here. You could have come back." Bernice met her eyes. So could she. The studio went quiet except for wind dragging a branch across the roof. Tessa lowered the lid. "What happened between you? I told you. Today we fire. You've had 4 todays, and the kiln is almost safe." "Almost?" Bernice reached past her and turned the first switch. The elements made a faint metallic hum. Tessa smelled hot dust and immediately reached for the switch. "Leave it. It smells wrong. It smells unused. That's comforting." They stayed with the kiln. Every hour, Bernice increased the heat, while Tessa recorded the time and temperature in a new notebook she bought because writing in Evelyn's felt like trespassing. The thermocouple climbed slowly. At midnight, the studio had grown warm enough for Tessa to remove her cardigan. Grant arrived at 12:15. He opened the door, saw the orange glow through the kiln's spy hole, and stopped. "What is that?" "A kiln," Tessa said. "I know what a kiln is." Bernice, seated in Evelyn's chair with a sandwich, said, "Evidence suggests otherwise." Grant glanced at her. "Bernice? You got taller." "I was 26 the last time you saw me." "Then it's the room." He looked at Tessa. "Why didn't you tell me you were firing? You knew I was making bowls." "In an appliance from the 70s? "80s, Bernice said. "Mostly." Grant crossed to the kiln, but stayed a careful distance away. "Is it safe? We rewired it." "That isn't what I asked." "Yes," Tessa said. "We're staying until it shuts down. Does the insurance cover this?" "I don't know." His face changed. "That's not good enough." Bernice wrapped the rest of her sandwich. "You've got gas in that back room with a corroded line. Did your inspector note it?" "We're capping the gas." "Good. The electric kiln draws less than a clothes dryer. New cord, new elements, sound outlet, attended firing." Grant looked at the temperature reading. "How long?" "Another 3 hours," Tessa said. "Then it cools." "And you're doing this how many times?" "As many as I need." "No." That's not an answer. The resemblance between him and Elaine appeared most strongly when either believed the other person was being unreasonable. Their mouths narrowed in exactly the same way. Tessa opened her notebook. 2 bisque loads, probably 2 glaze loads for the samples. Maybe a third if I have failures. Failure sounds great. Pottery fails. Houses burn. "Not from this kiln," Bernice said. Grant rubbed his forehead. "The buyers want everything out 4 days before closing. They're having somebody assess the studio foundation. So, I have 24 days. You have 24 days to move. not fire until the 23rd and then start packing. I understand. Do you? Tessa put down her pen. Everybody keeps asking me that, when what they mean is, will I do it their way? I mean, do you understand that if anything delays closing, it costs all of us? And if I don't finish these samples, it costs me. That is not equivalent. It is to me. Grant looked toward the numbered bowls waiting on the shelf. His expression softened, but his voice did not. Just, don't make your emergency everybody else's. He left before Tessa could answer. Bernice waited until his truck started. He always did enter a room like he was responsible for gravity. He runs a construction company. Same thing, with invoices. He isn't wrong about the closing. No. Tessa looked at the glowing kiln. You could pretend he is. You didn't call me for comfort. I'm beginning to question why I called you. For my pleasing temperament. The firing reached temperature just after 3. Bernice showed Tessa how to confirm it using witness cones positioned near the spy hole, then they shut the kiln down. You cannot open it, Bernice said. I know. You say that like someone who intends to open it. I have used kilns before. You use them with Evelyn standing over you. I also crossed streets without her. Poorly, probably. Bernice took her toolbox this time, but left the kiln manual. Tessa slept on the studio floor until sunlight warmed her face. The kiln still radiated heat. She went to the diner, worked 6 hours, returned, and held her palm near the lid. Still warm. She sorted glaze jars to avoid touching it. At 7 that evening, she lifted the lid 1 inch. Heat brushed her knuckles. She closed it again. You're dead, she told Evelyn. This is an unreasonable amount of supervision. By morning, the bowls were cool enough to unload. All 4 had survived. Their pale bisque surfaces felt dry and faintly rough beneath her fingers. One had warped enough that the rim rose on one side, subtle but visible when she set it at eye level. She numbered it with a question mark in her new notebook. The second bisque load held 5 bowls. Bernice arrived for the beginning, then left Tessa to manage the switches herself. She called every 2 hours. I thought you trusted me, Tessa said on the 3rd call. I trust the kiln less. Then call it. It doesn't answer. The second firing produced 4 usable bowls and one with a thin S-shaped crack through the base. Tessa set the cracked one aside instead of crushing it. She wanted evidence that survival was not the same as success. 8 candidates remained. River smoke was harder. The recipe in Evelyn's notebook listed percentages and a total batch weight, but 2 ingredients had been replaced over the years. Bernice insisted they mix small tests with different amounts of iron and apply them to tiles using the old clay body. I have 8 days, Tessa said. You can waste 1 on testing or 8 on failure. They mixed 4 variations. Tessa labeled each tile, weighed every ingredient twice, and sieved the glaze until her shoulder ached. The dry materials rose in pale clouds despite their masks and settled over the table. The test firing revealed 4 shades that all looked wrong. 1 was brown. 1 was nearly black. 1 had the dull gray of wet cement. The closest version turned blue at the edges. Tessa lined the tiles beneath the studio light. River smoke had blue in it. Not that much. It might look different on a full bowl. It will look like a larger mistake. Tessa picked up the original gray bowl Celia had returned. Its surface had depth the tiles lacked, darker in the low places, warm where the glaze thinned at the rim. Bernice held it beside the test tiles. She changed something, Tessa said. Or the materials changed. Did she tell you? We weren't speaking by then. Tessa opened another notebook and searched the river smoke entries. Most referred to the older recipe. Later pages contained firing temperatures, but no complete glaze notes. Evelyn knew the mixture well enough that she stopped copying it. Near the back, Tessa found a line written sideways beside a kiln diagram. RS new clay. Add bentonite. Tea mixed too thick. Remind her, patience is not standing around. Helpful, Tessa said. Bernice read over her shoulder. She was right about the thickness. She couldn't just say that. She just did. She could have said, how much bentonite? That would have been useful rather than memorable. They adjusted the closest test. Tessa added bentonite, thinned the glaze by specific gravity rather than instinct, and dipped 2 more tiles. The next morning, after another small firing and a cooling period Tessa endured, without opening the lid, 1 tile emerged almost right. Not Evelyn's gray. Close enough to belong beside it, without pretending to be identical. Tessa glazed 4 bowls. The first coat dried unevenly, leaving ridges where her pouring grip faltered. She washed it off before it set completely and began again. Bernice showed her how to cradle the bowl on 2 fingers and rotate through the pour. Tessa hated how easy Bernice made it look. "You could do one," she said. "They're your samples. You've touched everything else. I've touched the kiln. I've touched your recipe. I crushed one bad bowl, which I consider public service. I'm not making them for you." Tessa poured again. The glaze settled smoother. She cleaned every foot, checked every rim, and loaded the 4 candidates. They fit with less than an inch between the widest edges. The kiln seemed too small for the amount of hope inside it. Bernice stayed through the hottest part of the firing. At 11, when the witness cone began to bend, the clicking wheel started turning in Tessa's mind. "You're rushing," Evelyn had written. Tessa adjusted the final switch more slowly than she needed to. The firing ended after midnight. Bernice left. Tessa stretched out on the floor with the new notebook beneath her head, waking every hour to check a kiln that was already cooling. She waited through the next day. When the lid finally lifted, the first bowl looked beautiful. River smoke lay satin gray over its wide curve, deepening near the foot. Tessa laughed aloud, one shocked burst. Then she turned it. A bare white patch spread beneath the rim where the glaze had crawled away from the clay. The second bowl had warped. So had the third. The fourth sat level, its glaze unbroken. Tessa lifted it with both hands. It was the one with the heavy foot. Tessa carried the heavy bowl into the kitchen at Hart's table and set it on the steel counter. Celia finished slicing a lemon before she looked at it. 1. The other 3 failed. How? Crawling on 1, warping on 2. And this one? It survived. That isn't what I asked. Tessa pushed the bowl toward her. Celia lifted it. She held it in one palm, moved it from counter height to shoulder height, then reached across the cutting board as if serving someone at a table. Her wrist lowered before the bowl did. Too heavy. It's 6 ounces heavier than the old ones. That's a lot when you carry 500 of them in a week. It won't chip easily. A cinder block won't chip easily. I don't serve pasta on 1. Tessa stared at the bowl. Celia ran her fingers around the foot. This is where most of the weight is. I was trying to keep water from pooling underneath. You succeeded. I can fix it. How long? I have 4 more bisque fired. I can trim the glaze foot down before. Don't weaken bad work to make it look like good work. Tessa's face warmed. It isn't bad work. It's wrong for what I asked. The cook who had been chopping parsley during Tessa's first visit entered carrying a crate of onions. He looked from Celia to Tessa and immediately decided the onions needed his full attention. Celia set the bowl down. "You want me to tell you it's close?" "No, it is." "That doesn't help. Usually doesn't." Tessa had brought the warped bowls in her car. She almost went out for them, then imagined Celia setting each one on the steel and pressing a finger against the rim. "I need more time." "You have 6 days. I know." "Can you do it in 6? The answer rose automatically. Tessa stopped it. "I can make another group in 6 days. I don't know if all 4 will pass." Celia nodded once. "That's better." "Better than what?" "Than pretending uncertainty is confidence." Celia went to the dish rack and removed one of Evelyn's older gray bowls. The glaze had worn thin around the rim. She placed it beside Tessa's. "Take that." Tessa did not touch it. "You said you're short on them." "I am." "What if I break it? Then you'll know what breaking one costs." "That's a terrible sales pitch." "It's not a sale. It's a loan." Tessa lifted Evelyn's bowl. It was lighter than she remembered, but not delicate. The curve began lower than hers, and the foot was broad without being deep. She turned it over. The wren appeared beneath 30,000 washings, softened but legible. "You were looking for the mark because you wanted more of her work," Tessa said. "I was looking because she didn't stamp what she wouldn't stand behind. Not everything unmarked was bad. No. But if I found the mark, I knew what I had." Tessa traced the bird with her thumb. "Bring that back," Celia said. "I will." "And don't copy it." Tessa looked up. "The bowl," Celia said. "Not just the bird. If you copy every measurement without understanding why it works, you'll make a respectable corpse. You always talk like this, only between lunch and dinner." Back at the farmhouse, Grant's truck stood beside the studio with the tailgate down. The rolling work table was halfway through the door. Grant had tilted it onto 2 rusted casters and was trying to clear the frame. One wheel had jammed against the threshold. A long scrape exposed clean concrete behind it. "What are you doing?" He let the table settle. "Moving this out." "Why?" The buyers want the building cleared for the foundation guy. They want everything out today? No, but I'm taking a load to my storage unit. That doesn't go to your storage unit. It's a table, Tessa. It's my table. You can't fit it in your apartment. I'm not putting the studio in my apartment. Then where are you putting it? I'm working on that. Grant wiped his hands on his jeans. This weighs 200 pounds and one wheel doesn't turn. I can use it at the shop. You decided that by yourself? I'm offering to move it and store it. You said use it. While storing it? Tessa set Evelyn's bowl on a high shelf, away from the door. Grant noticed it. Is that from the restaurant? It's a reference. So, she liked your sample? No. He waited. The foot was too heavy. I'm sorry. You look relieved. I don't. You look like the universe has returned to code. That's not fair. Neither is taking my work table. Grant gripped the table edge. You cannot save every object in here by attaching the word my to it. You gave me the contents. We had this conversation. We keep having it because you keep seeing new things you want. I don't want this. I need work surfaces at the shop, and you need the building empty. Then help me move it where I'm going. Which is where? Tessa had no answer. Grant's frustration softened into something worse. Pity. Leave it, she said. Tess, leave it. He set the table flat with a metallic bang that made every bisque bowl on the shelf seem to ring. Then he walked out without closing the door. The next morning, the table was gone. There was no note. Grant had taken 2 metal shelving units as well, leaving glaze jars and kiln furniture stacked on the floor. The high shelf still held Evelyn's gray bowl. Tessa called him. His voicemail picked up. She called again. You don't get to make this an emergency because you waited until I left, she said after the beep. Bring back the table. At the diner, she moved through breakfast with her phone in her apron pocket. It remained silent until 10:30 when Kendra called. Grant's in a meeting, she said. His thumbs are? He told me you'd be upset, so he knew. I didn't say he was right. Will you tell him to bring it back? Kendra exhaled. Tessa could hear restaurant noise behind her, silverware dropping into bins. He rented the storage unit for estate things, Kendra said. He thinks the table is safer there. He said he needs it at the shop. I know. Did you know he was taking it? No. That answer came fast enough to believe. Kendra lowered her voice. He's scared the closing will go wrong. He put money into the gutter, the inspection repairs, the plumber. He's been doing work he won't get paid for until the house sells. So he takes my equipment? I'm explaining, not agreeing. Everybody keeps explaining Grant like he's weather. Everybody explains you that way too. Tessa leaned against the wall beside the dry storage shelves. Kendra continued more gently. Where are you moving the studio? I don't know yet. Then figure that out. Not because he's right, because 20 days is 20 days. After the call, Patrice found Tessa crushing empty sugar packets in one fist. That how we're sweetening coffee now? He took my table. Who? Grant. The heartless bastard has matured. Tessa laughed, then pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes. Patrice pulled a chair from the break area. Sit. I have tables. You're currently bad at them. Tessa sat. I thought making the bowls was the hard part, she said. Was that before you made any bowls? Yes. Life enjoys a reveal. I don't have a place to move the wheel. I don't have enough power at my apartment for the kiln, even if the landlord allowed it. I can't afford a proper studio. You don't need a proper studio. You need an improper room with electricity. You have one? No, but that sounds easier to find. Bernice arrived that afternoon with 4 lengths of lumber strapped to the roof of her station wagon. She looked at the empty space where the work table had stood. Where's the table? Grant stored it while using it. Bernice closed her eyes briefly. That table was mine. Tessa stared at her. What? I bought the frame from a bakery that closed. Evelyn paid for the steel top. We argued for a month about whether that made it half hers. Did it? No. It made the top half hers. Grant said it was estate property. Grant says things in complete sentences and hopes nobody checks. Tessa felt anger spark again. Can you tell him? I could. Or you could. I did. He took it anyway. Bernice studied her, then unloaded the lumber. What's that? A temporary table. I don't need a temporary table. I need him to bring mine back. You need somewhere to glaze today. They laid the lumber over 2 pairs of sawhorses. It bowed slightly in the middle and had splinters along one edge. I hate it, Tessa said. It doesn't care. Bernice picked up Evelyn's bowl. She turned it over, saw the wren, and went still. Celia loaned it to me. Of course she did. She told me not to copy it. Good advice. Tessa set her heavy sample beside it. Bernice weighed one in each hand. The foot isn't your only problem, she said. Your wall thickens through the lower curve. You're lifting from too high. How did Evelyn get it so even? She compressed the base longer, then she pulled from the bottom. Show me. No, you showed me the kiln. I repaired the kiln. I'm not throwing Celia's bowls. Just show me the pull. Bernice looked toward Evelyn's empty stool. When she sat at the wheel, she adjusted it lower. Tessa had never seen anyone do that. Bernice centered a lump of clay in 3 movements, opened it, and paused with her fingers resting inside. Evelyn pushed from here, she said. I braced lower. Neither is sacred. The clay rose. Bernice's bowl was more angular than Evelyn's, the curve tightening sooner, but the wall was even, and the foot already implied, before she cut it free. You make it look easy, Tessa said. It was easier before my wrist became unionized. Tessa sat down after her. She compressed the base. She placed her inside fingers lower and listened through the pressure. The wall moved outward, then rose. There, Bernice said. Stop. It's too small. It will get larger next pull. Tessa pulled again. The shape widened without gaining heaviness. They made 6 before dark. Tessa ruined 2, disliked 1, and kept 3. She wrapped the wearboard in plastic and left it on the temporary table. As Bernice put on her coat, Tessa held up Evelyn's bowl. Was the wren only her mark? Bernice's face closed slightly. It was Evelyn's, she said. That isn't what I asked. No. Bernice picked a splinter from the new table. It isn't. What did it mean? It meant she had checked the piece. Even yours? If it left this studio under the Rowan name? Yes. Did that bother you? Eventually. Tessa waited, but Bernice turned toward the door. You don't have time for old fights, she said. They keep moving my furniture. Bernice almost smiled. Then she looked back at the 3 bowls beneath plastic. Your grandmother's mark meant she accepted the blame, she said. People enjoy the pride part and forget that. After she left, Tessa opened the green address book and began calling every warehouse, garage, and vacant storefront within 10 miles. Most cost too much. 2 had no adequate electricity. 1 landlord laughed when she said kiln. The 8th call reached a man who owned the narrow commercial building behind Hart's table. He had a storage bay with a concrete floor, a vented wall, and an outlet left by a former sign shop. It's ugly, he warned. I'm not decorating. And there's restaurant noise through the wall. I've worked in a diner for 6 years. He named a monthly rent that still made her stomach tighten. Tessa looked at the 3 damp bowls, the borrowed gray one, and the bare strip of floor where her work table had been. When can I see it? She asked. The storage bay was uglier than advertised. Its concrete floor sloped toward a drain, plugged with what looks like hardened blue paint. 1 cinder block wall had been painted beige until the painter lost conviction halfway across. A dented metal door opened onto the alley behind Hart's table, where empty produce crates leaned against a dumpster. The landlord, Martin Say, watched Tessa inspect the electrical panel. You know what you're looking at? No? Good. Hate being the only one. The former sign shop had installed a heavy outlet for a laminating machine. It matched the test kiln's requirements, though Tessa would not trust it until Bernice inspected it. There was a utility sink with cold water, a ceiling vent, and enough room for the wheel, shelves, work table, and kiln, if Grant returned the work table. How long has it been empty? Tessa asked. 7 months. Why? Ugly. You mentioned that. People still get surprised. The rent was modest by commercial standards and ruinous by hers. Martin wanted the first month and a deposit. Utilities were separate. No gas equipment, no sleeping in the unit, which he said while looking directly at the crease the studio floor had left along Tessa's cheek. I don't sleep in workplaces. Everybody sleeps in workplaces. I'm saying don't bring a mattress. Through the wall came the muffled crash of restaurant pans, followed by a man shouting, "Behind you!" The noise steadied her. I need 3 days, Tessa said. Martin shook his head. I need an answer tomorrow. Somebody's looking Friday. Somebody else wants this? People like ugly. You just said they don't. Depends what it costs. She should have walked away. The order did not exist yet. 4 bowls stood between possibility and a contract, and 3 of those bowls were currently wet enough to collapse under a thumb. Tessa wrote him a check. Her bank balance afterward was $26.41. Patrice added 2 closing shifts to Tessa's schedule without asking how she planned to throw pottery after midnight. "You'll complain if I don't," Patrice said. "You'll complain if I do." I chose the complaint with wages. Tessa sold the warped estate sale bowl online for $8 after describing it honestly as slightly uneven handmade stoneware. A woman bought it within an hour and wrote that uneven sounded charming. Tessa packed it with more care than the sale justified. She kept making bowls. The temporary lumber table flexed whenever she wedged clay, so Bernice braced it with 2 buckets filled with old plaster molds. They rotated the damp bowls under plastic, uncovered them for 20 minutes at a time, then covered them again. Tessa ran a fan across the room, but not directly at the clay. "Drying fast isn't the same as rushing," she said. "It is, if you say it defensively," Bernice replied. They chose 6 candidates from the new group. The walls were even. The feet carried less clay and opened more broadly beneath the curve. One leaned slightly, but Tessa could not tell whether the flaw was in the bowl or her exhausted vision. Bernice set Evelyn's borrowed bowl beside them. "Stop comparing after this," she said. "I need the dimensions." "You have the dimensions. Now you need your hands." Tessa lifted her newest bowl. It weighed almost exactly what Evelyn's did before firing. Its lip curved outward a fraction more. Celia said not to copy it. Then, "Don't apologize for the rim." They fired the bisque load on the 3rd night. Tessa sat with the kiln while filling out a rental form for the storage bay and listing every piece of equipment she would move. Wheel, test kiln, glaze materials, wear boards, tools, shelving. Work table remained on the list. At 2 in the morning, Grant texted, "Inspector comes Monday. Need rear room clear, including gas kiln area." She replied, "Bring my table and shelves." His answer arrived 5 minutes later. "They're secure. I'll help move them when you have a location." "I have a location." The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, and returned. "Where?" Tessa gave him the address. "That's not a pottery district." She stared at the message. "There is no pottery district," she added. "Bring them Saturday." Grant did not answer. The bisque firing produced 5 good bowls. One cracked through the foot. Tessa thanked it for revealing itself early and dropped it into the discard box. Bernice raised an eyebrow. "We're thanking failures now?" "Patrice says I'm mean when I'm tired." "You're hoping pottery appreciates emotional growth?" "It better. I can't afford health insurance." They glazed the 5, including a spare. Tessa thinned river smoke carefully, stirred between every pour, and wiped each surface with a damp sponge before applying it. The glaze dried without ridges. To reduce warping, Bernice adjusted the shelf positions and showed Tessa how to place each bowl with equal space around it. They fired slightly slower through the temperature range where the clay softened most. "How did Grandma do restaurant loads in the big kiln?" Tessa asked. "Badly at first." "She warped pieces?" "She warped an entire order once. 40 dinner plates." Tessa looked up. "She told me she lost them in a power outage. Gas kiln." "I know." Bernice's mouth twitched. "What did she do?" Tessa asked. "Made them again. All 40, 46. She wanted extras. How long? 3 weeks. Barely slept. Accused the clay company, the weather, me, and a freight train that passed 2 miles away. Was it her fault? Kiln was loaded too tightly. By her, by us." Tessa waited for Bernice to assign the blame. She did not. The glaze firing ended near dawn. Tessa waited until late the following night before opening it. Bernice was there, sitting on an upside-down bucket with her boots crossed. "You can lift it," she said. "Are you trying to make me responsible for the disappointment?" "Completely." Tessa raised the lid. All 5 bowls were gray. That alone felt miraculous. She removed them one by one. The first sat level. The glaze had broken slightly brown along the rim, but showed no bare patches. The second had a pinhole near the foot, too small to catch a fingernail. The third was clean. The fourth rocked. Tessa pressed one finger to its rim. It clicked against the table. "No," she whispered. "The fifth," Bernice said. The fifth sat level. Tessa arranged the 4 usable bowls on the temporary table. Their gray varied slightly from piece to piece. Their rims were not mathematically identical. One stood perhaps 1/8 of an inch taller than another. Together, they looked like they belonged to the same person. Tessa turned each over. Blank feet faced her. The brass wren stamp was still in the brown mug upstairs. She had thought about it during every step. The mark could not honestly turn these into Evelyn's work. Still, the empty clay looked unfinished. Did she stamp before the glaze firing? Tessa asked, usually before bisque. So I couldn't mark these now, even if I wanted to. You could use an oxide stamp or paint it on. I wasn't asking how. Bernice picked up the cleanest bowl. Evelyn used the Ren-on work that met her standard, her work. Work from this studio. You said it was her mark. It was. Both things were true. That was part of the problem. Tessa waited. Bernice ran her thumb over the blank foot. When we started selling together, customers already knew Evelyn. Her name got us into shops. Her mark told them the work came through her studio. I thought that was practical. And later, I got tired of being practical. Did you make pieces with her mark? I made pieces she checked and marked. That isn't the same answer. No. Bernice set the bowl down. If you put the Ren on these, Celia might think Evelyn began them. I know. If you leave them blank, she'll know they're samples. I know. You don't need me to tell you. That hasn't stopped you before. Bernice smiled faintly. Leave them blank. Tessa did. She returned Evelyn's bowl to Hart's table and delivered the 4 samples in a produce box Kendra had reinforced with tape. Celia unpacked them at the kitchen counter. She examined the feet first. That's improved. Say it louder. Bernice is in the car. Bernice Hale? She helped with the kiln. That explains why you look irritated. She says hello. Does she? No. Celia checked each bowl for rocking. All 4 sat still. She nested them, lifted the stack, separated them again, and ran a fingertip around the pinhole. This won't affect use, Tessa said. I know. I almost held that one back. Why didn't you? It's sound. I'm trying not to confuse imperfect with unsafe. Celia glanced at her, then carried the bowls to the scale. Their weights varied by less than 2 ounces. The color isn't exact, Tessa said. I didn't ask for exact. The rims break warmer than hers. I can see them. Tessa stopped talking. Celia placed the samples on the dish rack. We start tonight. All 4? All 4. What are you serving? Food. I meant in these. Pasta, beans, braised chicken, whatever fits. How will you track them? Celia picked up a black grease pencil and wrote T beneath each foot. The letter looked temporary and severe. 2 weeks, she said. If one chips from normal handling, that's information. If one cracks, that's more information. If all 4 survive, we talk about the order. Can I check on them? You can eat here and pay for dinner like everyone else. I can't afford to. Then don't hover. Tessa made it to the front door before turning back. What if your staff drops one? Celia leaned through the kitchen doorway. Then gravity remains undefeated. That night, Tessa moved the first load into the storage bay. Kendra came alone in her hatchback. She folded the rear seats flat and helped carry glaze jars, tools, and the old notebooks. She did not mention Grant until the car was full. He'll bring the table tomorrow. He told you that? I told him that. Tessa closed the hatch. You don't have to referee us. I know. Then why do you? Kendra looked toward the studio. Because both of you think the first person to soften loses. She climbed into the driver's seat. At the bay, they arranged the notebooks on a shelf and stacked glaze jars beneath the temporary table. Restaurant noise traveled through the wall. Voices, pans, the rush of water. Tessa recognized Celia's sharp hot behind, followed by laughter she could not make out. Then came the industrial dishwasher. It roared to life on the other side of the cinder blocks. Tessa placed her palm against the wall as if she might feel 4 gray bowls moving through the heat. The dishwasher ran 6 times before the restaurant closed. Tessa counted every cycle. On the 7th, she stopped unpacking and pressed her ear to the wall. A cart rattled. Dishes knocked together. Someone laughed, then Celia shouted something about a knife in the wrong sink. No crash followed. That's encouraging, Kendra said. It could have cracked quietly. Do bowls do that? The vindictive ones. Kendra carried in the final box from her car. Then, don't let them know you're listening. They worked until Hart's table went silent. By then, the bay contained most of the hand tools, glaze supplies, notebooks, and wear boards. The wheel remained at the old studio because moving it required Grant's truck. So did the kiln. Grant arrived the next morning with the 2 metal shelving units but no work table. He backed into the alley, lowered the tailgate, and said, "This place is rough. It's a storage bay. That wall's damp. It's stained. From damp. From a bad paint job." He pressed his palm to the cinder block, as if personally certified to detect moisture. Tessa began unloading a shelf. "Careful," he said. "Bottom bracket's loose. It wasn't loose when you took it." "It was. Where's the table?" "At my shop." Kendra, standing beside the bay door, closed her eyes. Grant continued before either woman spoke. "I needed it for a cabinet installation." "I'll get it here." "When?" "After Thursday. The kiln and wheel move. Wednesday, you have that lumber set up. That is 4 boards balanced on sawhorses. It's working. It isn't yours to loan me instead of my table." Grant set down his end of the shelf. "We have 12 days until closing, and the studio is barely half cleared. Can we prioritize?" "I am." "Bring back the table." "I said I will." "You also said the shelves were secure while you used them." "I didn't use the shelves." "Congratulations." Kendra grabbed the shelf before it tipped. "Could both of you hold the thing you're fighting around?" They carried it inside. Grant inspected the electrical panel, the vent, and the distance between the planned kiln location and the wall. His questions were irritating and mostly useful. He recommended a heat shield behind the kiln and offered 2 cement boards from his shop. "Are those mine too?" Tessa asked. "No, they're leftover. From whose house?" He stared at her. "I'm kidding," she said. "You don't sound like it. I'm out of practice." He left the cement boards that afternoon. Tessa did not thank him until Kendra gave her a look. The 4 sample bowls survived their first 3 nights. Celia provided updates with the emotional range of a weather station. No chips, 1 metal mark, all level. Tessa visited on the 4th afternoon and found 1 bowl filled with lemons near the prep counter. "Is that part of the test?" she asked. "We needed somewhere to put lemons. Acid exposure." "Sure." She checked beneath the foot. The grease pencil T remained. Celia took the bowl away from her. "You're handling it more than my servers are. Any thermal cracks?" "No." "Water collecting in the foot?" "No." "Do they stack?" "You know they stack." "I know they stacked in the studio. Kitchens have different air." Celia's mouth twitched. "Go home." The old studio became emptier by decisions Tessa had avoided. She kept every tool that showed regular wear and discarded duplicates that had rusted beyond use. She saved glaze tests with legible labels, not the hundreds that had faded into mystery. Bernice helped her separate raw materials worth moving from powders that had absorbed so much moisture they had become questionable chemistry. The gas kiln stayed. Tessa had imagined taking it apart brick by brick, but Bernice showed her how many were cracked, contaminated, or fused with old glaze. The steel frame had shifted. The burners needed rebuilding. Moving it would cost more than constructing a safer kiln later. "Evelyn built this," Tessa said. "We built it," Bernice replied. "Doesn't that make leaving it worse?" Bernice looked through the spy hole into the cold chamber. "We built it to fire pots, not to become a shrine to combustion." They salvaged the kiln shelves, posts, burner controls, and usable brick. The rest would remain when the building came down. Tessa expected Bernice to be unsentimental. She did not expect to find her alone in the firing room after dark, one hand resting on the steel frame. Tessa stayed outside until Bernice came out. Neither mentioned it. The test bowls survived a week. On the 8th night, one slipped from a server's wet hands and hit the rubber mat beside the dish station. Celia called Tessa. "It didn't break," she said. "Which one?" "Number 3. "There aren't numbers. There are now." "Did it chip?" "No." "Hairline crack?" "I'm still on the floor looking at it." Tessa sat on the edge of her bed in the farmhouse. Most of the room had been packed. The brown mug stood alone on the dresser with the brass wren stamp and 3 dead pens. "Tap it," Tessa said. "With what?" "Your fingernail. Does it ring evenly?" Celia tapped the bowl. The sound came faintly through the telephone. "Well?" "I can't diagnose pottery by telephone." "Then why did you make me do it?" I panicked. "Good night, Tessa." The call ended. Tessa laughed into the empty room. 2 days later, Hart's table posted a photograph of braised chicken served in one of the gray samples. The bowl looked almost blue beneath the restaurant lights. Tessa saved the image to her phone, but did not share it. She was afraid of treating a test like a victory. Grant was not. He reposted the photograph through his company's social media page beside images of Evelyn's blue vase, 2 marked pictures, and the studio before it had been emptied. Above them, he wrote, "The Rowan tradition returns. Handmade local stoneware, built to last. New work and select Evelyn Rowan originals available soon. Message us for details." Tessa saw it because Patrice texted her a screenshot with the question, Is your brother selling your imaginary bowls? By the time Tessa called, the post had been shared 23 times. Grant answered cheerfully. Hey, take it down. A pause. You saw the post. You used Celia's photograph. It's public. You said new work is available. It will be. My samples are still being tested, which is why I said soon. You also said, message us. The business page has reach. People are already asking about mugs. There are no mugs. Then we make mugs after bowls. We? Grant exhaled. Tessa, this is good. You have a product. I have marketing, customer contacts, transportation, workspace. You have my table. I have business experience. You called the studio junk. I changed my mind. After somebody else wanted it. That's how markets work. No, that's how you work. Silence sharpened between them. Grant's voice lowered. The Rowan name isn't yours alone. I'm not using it. You are Evelyn Rowan's granddaughter making her designs for her old customer. I'm making my bowls. Using the wren? No. Another pause, different this time. Why not? Take down the post. He did not. Instead, he called a family meeting at the farmhouse, though he described it as us stopping by to clear things up. Elaine sat at the dining table with the legal pad she still used for estate expenses. Kendra remained standing near the door. Grant brought printed screenshots of customer messages as if the paper made them orders. 11 serious inquiries, he said. One asked if you sell spoon rests, Tessa said. That's still demand for a thing that doesn't exist. Grant arranged the pages. We can build this properly. You handle production. I handle sales, costs, shipping, the website, and the money. Obviously, the business handles the money. Your business. A new business. Shared. Elaine looked at Tessa. It may be worth considering. Tessa turned to her. You called the studio mildew wearing clay as a hat. That was the room, not your work. You priced Grandma's kitchen bowls at $5 because we did not understand. That's the first true thing anybody has said tonight. Elaine flinched. Grant pushed the screenshot of Celia's photograph toward Tessa. You're acting like I'm stealing something. I'm trying to help you scale. I have made 4 bowls. Exactly. You can't do everything alone. I'm not alone. Bernice is helping. His expression shifted. Bernice left Grandma. You don't know what happened. Neither do you. I know she built half that studio everyone called Grandma's. Elaine's eyes dropped to the legal pad. Grant laughed without humor. So now it's Bernice's legacy? Maybe legacy is just the word people use when they want credit without doing the work. Kendra looked at him. Take down the post. Grant's head turned. Seriously? You implied Tessa agreed. I used our family name. You used her bowl. It's a photograph from the restaurant. You knew what people would think. Grant gathered the screenshots into a neat pile. Fine. I'll take out the new work language. Take down all of it, Tessa said. No. The originals are ours to sell. Then sell them honestly. Don't make a dead woman's old pictures look like inventory for a business she never agreed to. Elaine spoke quietly. Grant. He looked at her, then at Kendra. The room had shifted away from him, and he knew it. I am the only person here trying to turn an opportunity into something sustainable, he said. You're trying to arrive after the hard part, Tessa replied. Grant left the screenshots on the table and walked out. The post remained online for another hour. Before Grant removed it, Tessa wrote a comment beneath it. The pictured gray bowl was made by me as one of 4 test pieces for Hart's table. No new Rowan pottery line currently exists, and no orders have been authorized. The marked originals shown here were made by Evelyn Rowan. Future work of mine will be identified under my own mark. Her hand shook after she pressed send. Celia called 10 minutes later. I've had 3 people ask if we're carrying Rowan pottery, she said. I'm sorry. Did you authorize the post? No. Are you taking orders through him? No. Is he involved in your work? No. Celia was silent. Tessa looked at the brown mug, the brass wren visible among the pens. I should have had my own mark before I brought you samples. A mark wouldn't fix your brother. It would make the answer shorter. Yes. Do you want to stop the test? I want to finish what we agreed. On the 14th day, Celia lined the bowls on the kitchen counter. There were metal marks, 1 shallow scrape beneath a rim, and no cracks. Number 3 carried a tiny nick where it had hit the floor, barely deep enough to feel. Celia named the price again. 24 bowls, half as deposit. Delivery by the beginning of October. Tessa signed the simple order sheet. Celia handed her a check. "You're not buying the Rowan name," Tessa said. "I'm buying bowls. Mine, if you make them." The check covered clay, glaze, electricity, rent, and little else. Tessa held it as carefully as she had held Evelyn's bowl. Bernice was waiting in the storage bay when she returned. On the temporary table lay Evelyn's brass wren stamp. Tessa had brought it from the farmhouse that morning. "Celia ordered 24, Tessa said. Bernice nodded, as if she had expected nothing less and would never insult Tessa by admitting it. "I need a mark." "Yes." "Not hers." "No." Tessa took a scrap of leather-hard clay and drew a small T with a needle tool. It looked like a roofing nail. Bernice sat beside her. "What did you think the wren was doing? Flying. Look again." Tessa pressed Evelyn's stamp into clay. The bird's wings were close to its body, caught between lifting and landing. Tessa drew a second bird with its wings open. It was crooked. She drew another, then another, simplifying the lines until the body curved naturally into the top of a T. Bernice examined the final sketch. "It won't be easy to stamp," she said. "I'll practice." "Good." Tessa cut the shape into a small plaster block, slowly enough that no one, living or dead, could accuse her of rushing. The plaster block chipped along the first wing. Tessa swore, carved a second, and pressed it into a strip of damp clay. The bird emerged too deep on one side and barely visible on the other. "Again," Bernice said. "You aren't even looking. I can hear disappointment." By the 8th attempt, the open wings printed cleanly and the stem of the T remained visible beneath the body. It did not have the tidy elegance of Evelyn's wren. It looked alert, slightly uneven, and determined to occupy more space than its size allowed. Bernice turned the test strip under the lamp. "Yours," she said. Tessa waited for a qualification. None came. She wrapped the plaster stamp in a clean cloth and placed it beside her wheel. The house closing consumed the next 4 days. Grant had the gas line capped, hired 2 men to remove the unsalvageable chemicals, and began stacking the remaining studio contents beside the door, whether Tessa had sorted them or not. He spoke to her through practical questions. "Do you want this fan? Are these boards trash? Can the sink be removed?" Tessa answered in the same language. "Keep." "No." "Not until Thursday." Neither mentioned the deleted post or the partnership that had existed for less than one evening in Grant's imagination. On the final night before the building had to be clear, Tessa found him in the rear firing room with a pry bar. He was loosening the steel frame around the gas kiln. "What are you doing?" "Saving the angle iron." Bernice said the frame shifted. "The steel's fine. It can be cut and reused." "By who?" "Anybody with a welder." He pulled at one corner. A dry whisper of brick dust fell to the floor. "Stop." Grant rested the pry bar against his leg. "You said the kiln stays." "It does." "The buyers want the room empty." The inspector said the built structure could remain for demolition. "They're charging extra to haul metal, then charge it to me." "With what?" The question escaped before he could soften it. Tessa looked at him. Grant set down the pry bar. "I'm sorry. You keep being sorry one sentence late. I'm trying to get this done." "So am I." "Then why are we fighting over steel you aren't taking?" "Because you don't even ask before you pull things apart. It's being demolished next week. That doesn't mean you get to make the first break." Grant's face changed. For once he seemed to understand the request beneath her anger. He stepped away from the kiln. "All right," he said. "It stays." They carried the last boxes out together. When the studio was empty, it became smaller. The pale shapes on the walls showed where shelves had protected old paint. Dust rings marked the places glazed buckets once stood. Evelyn's stool remained beneath the window because one leg had split and Tessa had decided not to move it. Grant pointed. "That too?" "No." "You sure?" "Yes." He nodded. At the door, Tessa looked back at the wheel's empty space, the sink, and the cold kiln. She expected some final sensation that would make leaving possible. Nothing arrived. Grant waited outside without hurrying her. Tessa closed the door. The work table appeared at the storage bay the next morning. Elaine drove Grant's truck badly, stopping crooked across the alley with one wheel on the curb. The steel table stood in the bed beneath 2 fraying straps. Tessa came outside in a clay-covered apron. "Where's Grant?" "At his shop." "Does he know you have his truck?" "He will when he looks for it." Elaine climbed down, tugging her coat straight. "He said he needed the table through Thursday." "It is Friday." "He said he'd bring it." "Yes, and I became tired of hearing both of you not discuss it." You took it? I retrieved it. From his active job site? His shop. That isn't better. It was beside a cabinet, not beneath one. Tessa looked at her mother's careful hair, her gold earrings, and the work gloves tucked into her coat pocket. You stole my table back. I would prefer returned. Grant's going to be furious. He has had that experience before. Elaine put on the gloves. How do we lower the tailgate? They nearly lost the table in the alley. Celia opened the restaurant's back door. Do you want help? No, both women said. Celia watched for another second. That appears mutual. She went back inside. Once the table stood in the bay, Tessa ran her hand over the steel top. Scratches crossed it that had not been there before. A crescent of dried construction adhesive clung near one edge. Elaine touched the adhesive. Grant said it would clean off. He knew you were bringing it? He knew after I had the keys. Tessa laughed. Elaine began removing her gloves. Well, I should go. Do you want to see the bowls? The question surprised both of them. Elaine looked toward the wearboards. Yes. Tessa had thrown 28 forms since receiving Celia's deposit. 24 stood beneath plastic in different stages of drying. 4 had already been rejected. 2 for thin bases, 1 for a ripple in the wall, and 1 because Tessa had tried to save a rim after touching it with her sleeve. She uncovered a row of leather-hard bowls. Each carried the open-winged T beneath its foot. Elaine picked up one carefully. That's your mark? Yes, it's a bird. Very observant family. I mean, it's like hers. Not the same. Elaine turned the bowl. No, hers looked folded. Tessa had never thought of Evelyn's wren that way. She marked some pieces I worked on, Tessa said. I know. The answer came too quickly. Tessa stared at her. You knew? I knew you helped her. That isn't the same. No. Elaine set the bowl down. But your grandmother showed me a set of mugs once and said the handles were yours. When? Years ago. She was annoyed because they were better than the handles on the previous order. Did she say they were good? She said they had stopped irritating her. That is not praise. It was from her. Why didn't you tell me? Elaine's gaze stayed on the bowl. I assumed she had. Tessa let out a breath that hurt on the way up. Elaine touched the new stamp. She should have. The simplicity of it left no one to argue with. Tessa turned away and uncovered the next board. I have to finish these feet before they dry. Can I help? Not with trimming. I didn't mean trimming. There were boxes to fold, paper to cut, glaze jars to label, and shelving to brace. Tessa gave her a list. Elaine stayed 3 hours. Production developed its own weather. The bay grew damp when bowls dried and unbearably hot when the kiln fired. Restaurant smells came through the vent. Garlic, stock, bread, occasionally burned sugar. Tessa worked closing shifts at the diner, slept in the afternoons, and fired through the night. She could fit only 4 bowls in each load. Every firing therefore carried too much importance. The first bisque load survived. The second produced a crack. The third emerged clean. In the fourth, a bowl split through the base with enough force to knock a chip from another foot. Tessa made 6 replacements. Bernice inspected every trimmed piece but touched none unless invited. She marked flaws with chalk, a heavy wall, a soft foot, a rim that dipped when viewed across the table. Tessa disagreed with half her decisions and rejected nearly all the pieces Bernice questioned. You enjoy being right, Tessa said. No, I enjoy you discovering I am. They refined the glaze in larger batches, checking its thickness before each pour. River smoke shifted subtly with each firing. Some bowls came out cooler gray, others warmer, but all shared the soft depth Celia had approved. Tessa stamped them before bisque. The first time she pressed the open-winged bird into a finished green bowl, her hands shook. She nearly doubled the mark by lifting unevenly. Bernice saw. It's not a ceremony, she said. It feels like one. That's dangerous. Why? Ceremonies make people think the action matters more than everything before it. Tessa looked at the bowl. Centering, pulling, drying, trimming, checking, firing, glazing, firing again, grinding the foot smooth, rejecting what she could not stand behind. She pressed the next mark without holding her breath. The old notebooks moved onto a shelf above the work table. One night, while looking for the final river smoke adjustment, Tessa found the page with the restaurant batch she had helped make years earlier. She traced the numbered list. Tiny wrens stood beside the accepted pieces. A later entry continued on the next page. Tea handle's clean now. Better balance than mine today. Still rushes foot when tired. Below it, Evelyn had added, let her finish gray order if hands fail again. Tessa read the line until the handwriting blurred. It was not a blessing. It did not say Tessa should inherit anything. Evelyn had written it because she needed a production reminder on a bad hand day. That made it more valuable. Bernice entered carrying 2 bags of clay and found Tessa seated at the work table. What? Tessa turned the notebook. Bernice read the lines. She was right about your feet. Could you not? Sorry. Sacred moment. She trusted me to finish an order. She trusted your work. Trusting you was more complicated. What does that mean? It means she loved needing you and hated that she needed anyone. Tessa closed the notebook. That's a terrible kind of love. Yes. Was she like that with you? Yes. Is that why you left? Bernice leaned against the table. I wanted my mark beside hers, she said. Not under it, not on a separate shelf. I wanted customers to know which hands did what. Evelyn said consistency mattered more than credit. I said that was convenient when the consistent name was hers. What did she say? That I was dismantling the studio over vanity. Were you? Partly. Tessa waited. Bernice smiled without pleasure. People can be right about the wound and still behave badly from it. Did you ever talk again? Once. She called after she stopped taking restaurant orders. She asked whether I wanted the gas kiln. What did you say? I told her I already had one. Did you? No. Tessa laughed softly. Bernice did too, then wiped beneath one eye with the heel of her hand as if studio dust had found her. The order came down to the final glaze load. 21 bowls had passed Tessa's checks. 2 others had glaze flaws beneath the rim. 1 rocked. Celia needed 24, and Tessa wanted at least 1 spare. 5 bowls went into the kiln. By then, the farmhouse had closed, the keys had changed hands, and the old studio waited behind a temporary fence for demolition. Everything Tessa could use had been moved. Everything she had chosen to leave was beyond retrieval. Elaine arrived with sandwiches as the kiln reached its final temperature. She had brought wrapping paper and the reinforced produce boxes. I thought you could pack the finished ones while this cools, she said. It won't be ready until morning. I know. You're staying? Elaine removed her coat. Unless you make it difficult to offer. Tessa handed her a roll of tape. They wrapped bowls until after midnight, Elaine folding the paper too neatly and Tessa refolding it for speed. Through the wall, Hart's table closed, quieted, and went dark. At 3, the kiln began cooling. At 5, 21 finished bowls sat boxed beside the door. The last 5 remained inside, hidden behind heat. 3 of them necessary, and none of them guaranteed. Tessa sat on the returned steel work table. Elaine rested beside her, shoulder touching hers. Neither apologized for leaning. At 9, Elaine made coffee using the little machine Celia had lent them through the back door. It tasted faintly of garlic. This is terrible, Elaine said. It's free. That doesn't change its flavor. It changed yours. Elaine looked into the paper cup. Your grandmother would have poured it into a plant. She killed plants with better coffee. The kiln had cooled enough that Tessa could hold her hand near the lid, but not touch it. She swept an already clean patch of floor. Elaine folded the unused wrapping paper. They did not discuss the 5 bowls. At 11, Bernice arrived, touched the kiln casing and said, Not yet. You drove here to say that? I also brought biscuits. Patrice's? I have sources. They ate at the steel work table. Elaine sat on one side and Bernice on the other, separated by 20 years of things neither had said. Their conversation moved cautiously through firing temperatures, the house closing, and whether the work table's dried adhesive would come off with a razor. I'm sorry about the table, Elaine said. Bernice spread jam on her biscuit. You didn't take it, no? But I watched people decide it belonged to whoever could move it. Bernice glanced at Tessa. That happened often in the old studio. Elaine folded her napkin into a smaller square. I believe my mother when she said you left, because you wanted control. I did want control. That doesn't mean her version was complete. No, I should have called you after she died. Bernice took a bite and chewed before answering. I knew. How? People call. They just don't always call the people who should know first. I'm sorry. I'm not sure I would have come. Elaine nodded. You still should have had the choice. Bernice looked at her for a long moment, then pushed the jam jar across the table. At 1, the kiln was warm rather than hot. Tessa opened it 2 inches. Bernice did not object. The smell of fired clay rose through the gap, dry and mineral. Tessa lifted the lid the rest of the way. 5 gray bowls waited inside. She removed the top shelf. The first bowl sat level. Its glaze had broken warm along the rim, matching the earlier batch. The open-winged mark beneath the foot was clean. The second had a pinhole near the base. Tessa ran her nail across it. The hole was shallow and sealed. "Acceptable," Bernice said. "I decide." Then decide correctly. Tessa said it with the first. The third bowl had warped, not dramatically. It might have passed on a tablecloth, but when Tessa pressed the rim, one side clicked against the steel. She placed it in the reject row. The fourth was sound. 3. She reached for the final bowl. It had been the best before firing, an even wall, balanced curve, clean foot. Now a faint line crossed its interior. Tessa turned it beneath the lamp. Elaine leaned closer. "Is that a crack?" "Maybe a glaze line." Bernice held out her hand. Tessa gave her the bowl. Bernice examined the underside, then tapped the rim with one fingernail. The tone wavered. "Crack," she said. Tessa took it back. "It doesn't go through. Not yet." 24 bowls were required. 24 sound bowls existed. There was no spare. Tessa looked at the 2 rejects and felt the old urge to argue with the clay, with Bernice, with the schedule. Celia would probably accept the pinhole. The third bowl might sit still on a napkin. The crack might never open. She picked up the cracked bowl and dropped it into the discard box. It broke into 3 pieces. Elaine startled. Bernice smiled. "What?" Tessa asked. "Nothing." "Say it." Evelyn always closed her eyes when she rejected a finished piece. That sounds like her? She wanted the pot to know it wasn't personal. Tessa packed the final 3. Hart's table was preparing for dinner service when they carried in the boxes. Celia cleared one end of the kitchen counter and opened them herself. She inspected every foot. She nested the bowls in stacks of 4, weighed 3 chosen at random, and examined the glaze beneath the brightest light in the kitchen. Tessa stood beside the dish rack with her arms crossed. Celia picked up the bowl with the pinhole. "It's sealed," Tessa said. "I know. It doesn't catch. I have a fingernail." Tessa shut her mouth. Celia set the bowl with the others and counted again. 24. No extras. 2 failed in the final firing. "You didn't bring them?" "No." "Good." Celia turned one bowl over. Her thumb moved across the open-winged bird. "This yours?" "Yes." It looks impatient. It's flying, could be falling. Then it has options. Celia carried the bowl to the line and set it beneath the heat lamps. "We'll start using them tonight." Tessa looked at the stacks. "All of them?" "They're bowls, not visiting diplomats." Celia gave her the remaining payment in an envelope. The money would cover another month of rent, new clay, and part of the electrical work needed before Tessa could install a larger kiln. It would not let her leave the diner. It would not make her secure. It would let her continue. Tessa tucked the envelope into her bag. "Thank you," she said. "You made what I ordered. You asked for Grandma's mark. I asked because I knew what it meant." Celia lifted one of Tessa's bowls. "Now I know what this one means." The old studio came down 3 mornings later. Tessa learned because Grant sent a message that said, "They're starting, in case you want to know." She did not want to know. She drove there anyway. The farmhouse no longer belonged to any of them. A temporary fence crossed the driveway, and a demolition machine stood beside the studio with its long arm raised. Tessa parked across the road. The first strike tore through the rear firing room wall. Brick dust rolled outward. The steel frame around the gas kiln held for a moment, then twisted into view. The second strike opened the main room. From the road, Tessa could see the high windows, the sink, and Evelyn's 3-legged stool beneath a gray sheet of dust. The room looked like a stage after the audience had gone. She put one hand on the brass wren stamp in her coat pocket. The machine's arm came down. The roof folded. One wall leaned inward, paused, and disappeared into the dust. Tessa cried without trying not to. She cried for Evelyn's hands and Bernice's missing name on the kiln manual. She cried for the bowls crushed in the reclaim bucket, the bad coffee, the blue pitcher, and every afternoon she had mistaken criticism for the whole truth. She cried because a place could be necessary and still not be forever. When the dust settled, the studio was a low pile of wood, brick, and bent metal. Tessa started her car and drove to the bay. The wheel waited near the window. The work table stood beneath the shelves. Her own stamp lay wrapped beside a row of fresh test tiles. Restaurant sounds traveled through the wall. She opened the vent and began wedging clay. Celia added the new bowls to the autumn menu service. The first weekend, 3 came through the dishwasher with metal marks, and 1 returned to the kitchen with tomato sauce dried beneath its foot. None cracked. Elaine made a reservation for the following Thursday. "I thought we were done with ceremonial meals," Tessa said on the phone. "We never had one. We had pasta among lamps. Grant toasted the wrong relative. Fair. Come to dinner. Who is coming?" A pause. Grant and Kendra. "No, Tessa. You don't get to schedule reconciliation between appetizers. I schedule dinner with people who aren't speaking. You speak, mostly about objects being taken, because they take objects. The table was returned, after you stole it, retrieved." Tessa looked through the open bay door. Bernice sat at the work table, carving a shallow serving dish with a loop tool. She claimed it was only a demonstration, though she had been demonstrating for 40 minutes. "Will Bernice be there?" Tessa asked. Elaine was quiet. "She can be. And Patrice. That makes 6. You can count. I taught you. Grandma taught me." Elaine sighed. Thursday at 7, Hart's table seated them at a round table near the back. Patrice arrived carrying the hideous ceramic bird, which she set in the center with a bundle of grocery store flowers in its hollow back. "I knew it was useful," she said. Celia stared at it. "What is that?" "Art. It's facing me. Art confronts." Bernice sat between Patrice and Elaine. Kendra chose the chair beside Tessa, leaving Grant across from her. He wore a collared shirt and looked as uncomfortable as if someone had assigned him a speech. Celia brought bread in one of Evelyn's old marked bowls. Tessa noticed it once. She turned it over, revealing the softened wren. Bernice saw too. Her hand paused above the bread. Celia set a small plate beside her. That bowl was from the second order. Bernice traced the rim. "I glazed it." "I know." "How?" "You sent me an invoice that listed every task separately. Evelyn would have hated that invoice." Bernice smiled. Dinner arrived in Tessa's bowls. Braised chicken for Elaine and Kendra, pasta for Patrice and Grant, beans and greens for Bernice. Tessa had ordered the same dish Celia served during the tests, partly because she wanted to see whether it looked right. It did. The gray glaze deepened the color of the sauce. The rim framed the food without crowding it. When Tessa lifted the bowl slightly to make room for a plate, the weight settled naturally into her hand. Across the table, Grant turned his over. The open-winged mark faced him. He rubbed his thumb across it and set the bowl down without speaking. Kendra watched him. "What?" Tessa asked. Grant cleared his throat. "It's good." "The food or the bowl?" "Both." "Celia made the food." "I know." He turned the bowl upright. "I was wrong. Nobody rescued him from the silence." Grant looked toward the kitchen, then back at Tessa. "I thought the studio was a burden," he said. "Then Celia wanted the bowls, and I decided that meant it was an opportunity I'd been smart enough to notice. You weren't." "No." Patrice lifted her water glass. "Promising start." "Patrice," Elaine said. "What?" "I'm supporting clarity." Grant gave a brief, unwilling smile. It vanished quickly. "I saw something working," he continued, "and I wanted to organize it before you could shut me out." Tessa stared at him. "I didn't shut you out. I know that now." "Do you?" He folded his napkin once, copying Elaine without noticing. "Grandma trusted you in there. She gave you a part of herself none of us understood. I told myself it was because you were available, or because you needed a place to live. It was easier than admitting she shared something with you that she didn't share with me." The confession did not erase the boxes, the online post, or the missing table. It did explain why his help so often arrived shaped like possession. "You gotta leave," Tessa said. "I stayed because somebody had to." "I know. You don't get to make caregiving sound like I won something. I'm not. You called it free rent." Grant looked down. "I did." Kendra's hand rested near his, but did not cover it. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not generally, for that. And for the post. And the table." Tessa let the apology remain specific. "If you want to help me," she said, "you ask. All right. You don't call it the family business. All right. You don't sell anything I haven't made, approved, and marked." Grant nodded. "All right. And if you ever write heritage on a website, I charge you double." Patrice raised her glass again. "That's policy." Grant laughed. The sound was careful but real. After dinner, Celia refused Elaine's attempt to pay for Tessa's meal and accepted payment for everyone else. At the door, she handed Tessa a small box. Inside were two of the original test bowls. The grease pencil letters had washed away, leaving the open wing marks beneath. "You're retiring them?" Tessa asked. "I'm buying the other two. These are yours." "Why?" "Every studio needs bowls." The bay was quiet when Tessa returned. Bernice helped her place one test bowl on the sink shelf and the other beside the brown mug. The brass wren stamp rested inside now, replacing the dead pens. "You gonna keep that out?" Bernice asked. "Yes. Why?" Tessa turned one of her new bowls upside down. Her open-winged bird faced Evelyn's folded wren across the work table. Different marks, different promises. "Because I know whose it is," she said. Through the wall, the restaurant dishwasher began its final cycle. Tessa switched off the work lamp, leaving both bowls where morning would find them.